Let me lay down the ground rules. I do not like to be messed with when I'm trying to teach. I'm very lenient in 1000 ways when I'm trying to do something. I'm extremely tough on a few, and you've got to follow those few if you want to stay along. If at any point I catch you spamming, if I catch your name not doing justice to this workshop, I will have Team Tag Mango remove you. Please do not. Do not interrupt my flow. Do not spam, do not send shit, do not try to interrupt while the teaching is happening. The course is designed such, the program is designed such so that we have about at least an hour. मैंने 3-3 घंटे डेली बोला है. I think we'll finish in about 1.5 to 2. उसके बाद का टाइम ही इसीलिए है ताकि हम आराम से Q&A करके क्लैरिटी establish कर सके concepts पे. ठीक है? So there's going to be enough time that we'll have interactively. But since there's a lot of people, you might not get a chance, for which we'll give you an email that you can reach out to. My teaching assistant, Vaibhav, is here. We'll uska email de denge aapko. If you have still questions left, we'll forward those questions. If we find कि उन questions में से कुछ ऐसे questions हैं जो address करने की जरूरत है for clarity's sake, we'll address those questions. The second thing I want you to understand is that this is a course in science. I've been trying to say that from the very get, but I want this to register very properly because आदमी को मैंने देखा है India में particularly, they have no concept of what psychology is. Everybody pretending outside on YouTube, etc., that they know what psychology is, they have no idea. They've never read a study. They don't know how to read an academic paper. They don't know how to come up with an academic argument. They have no concept of how the science of psychology is done. And ये तो मैं सिर्फ YouTube बोल रहा हूँ, that is a larger representative of most people outside. And what I mean by that is have an open mind when you study. Do not look very quickly for what will solve my problem, because that is an instinct in most of my crowd. Relax. Your problems are not that important. Appreciate knowledge for the sake of knowledge, and then maybe we'll solve your problems. Because if your conclusion comes before your understanding, then your understanding will be distorted forever. Relax, follow, breathe. We'll go over this step by step. On the brighter side, we'll call you guys Aadmi Gang, because the fundamental question we are trying to ask through this workshop is Aadmi kya chahta hai? And understand again, because there's too many people, I should clarify, Aadmi is an ironical term we are using. Of course, we mean insan, but it's post-ironical. We understand Aadmi inherently, like, it speaks about males, but it's supposed to mean insan. So this is going to be Aadmi Gang, because Aadmi kya chahta hai meme is my favorite meme these days. You are Aadmi Gang 1. All right. And so Aadmi Gang 1, after every session, and I've been reiterating this idea for a very long time. People who are in this online teaching industry, they understand कि जो ये है ना, I'm sure there's a lot of people who came up to you and like, why are you paying for Prakhar's course when there is free courses available online? Listen, of course do those free courses, but people don't do that because people don't care about Prakhar as much as they care about the community of people who are trying to get to the same space as they are. That's why classroom works. That's why university works. You're a community. You 1,300 people, as much as I think I remember, jitne bhi log hain, you guys are a community. You guys are here to learn together to get from point A to point B. That point A to point B, I'm deciding. Point A, I know. That point A to point B is kind of, panelists, Vaibhav, Team Tag Mango, just keep a check on the chat. I'm not looking at it anymore. मैंने उसको hide कर दिया थोड़ी देर के लिए.
Sure.
Right? We are trying to get from point A to point B. And your job in this process is to help your peers get there as well. We might have a Discord discussion room with everybody tomorrow night or tonight, where you guys can just hang out, talk to each other. Vaibhav can take whatever questions Vaibhav can handle. The course content is frankly a little deeper than what Vaibhav can immediately handle. But if there's questions he has, he can come and ask me and then we can discuss them. My purpose is to pass down how scientists think, especially in the field of psychology. What have they come up with? How have they answered the question, Aadmi kya chahta hai? Right? And in view of that, what we'll be studying is, let's see. Okay. Right. So fundamentals of psychology. Asim, this is the worst idea to put any kind of like ye jo effects hote hai na in a PowerPoint is the stupidest idea in the history of ideas, by the way. Anyway, he's done a good job at making it colorful. So here is some of the things I want you to remember. Every time you come here, you want a pen, a pencil, a notebook, and a water bottle. Get a snack as well. We'll take enough breaks. We'll take a lot of breaks. Maybe we'll take 6 breaks in a day, 5-minute, 10-minute breaks, right? We'll take shorter breaks, 2-minute breaks, 3-minute breaks. The idea of a break, as far as Prakhar and Prakhar's teaching style is concerned, is to let things settle over you. क्योंकि एक साथ एक स्टोरी में बहुत सारी डीप बातें हो जाती हैं. You need time for that stuff to get condensed in your head, for it to get consolidated in your head. And then what we'll do after those breaks mostly is we'll revisit those topics. You'll see how. I'm not very fond of PowerPoint, so for the most part, we'll just remove the PowerPoint. The other thing I want you to remember is that we'll play a game throughout. Throughout this, because there are so many people interacting, we'll play a game. Psychology is very weird, friends. Psychology is very weird. It's very different from philosophy. Philosophy almost has a need to always be deep. Philosophy tries to cut through logic that we just see from the superficial outside, tries to go in deeper. Psychology does not care about it. Psychology is trying to understand aadmi kya chahta hai. So we'll play this game. Every time you find that something deep was said, right deep. Whoever thinks it was deep, whoever thinks कि इसने तुम्हारे दिमाग के कुछ लॉजिक को कट करते हुए एक नया semblance बनाया, एक नया सवेरा आया, एक नई लाइट दिखी तुम्हें, write deep in the chat. And if you think this point could have been deeper, but it's so shallow, oh my God, we are so shallow like that. Just write shallow. I want you to label everything you learn as deep and shallow in the chat. I want you to compartmentalize what you learn as deep and shallow as you go through. And we'll see a lot of that, trust me. And finally, when we open up for discussion, we'll have brownie points for application-based question. कि भाई मेरी life में ये कैसे apply होता है? Suppose I miss in trying to explain, oh ये चीज तुम्हारी life में ऐसे apply होती है, or you don't have a clarity, ask me those questions. जो तुम यहां से सबसे important चीज pick up करके जा सकते हो ना, वो है ही ये. How does this stuff apply to my life? How do I think about how science and philosophy applies to my life? Of course, 3 days mein, you will not become BSc philosophy, MSc philosophy, PhD philosophy, or psychology rather. You won't in 3 days. What you are here for is curiosity on one end. How does the science of psychology work? And hunger on the other end. अब मेरे को कोई भी किताब दे दो साइकोलॉजी की, मैं ऑनलाइन बैठ के पढ़ लूंगा साइकोलॉजी. मेरे पास टूल्स हैं समझने के कि साइकोलॉजी ऑपरेट कैसे करती है. And this is what we'll cover roughly. Today we'll cover mostly the biological part of psychology. हम इसको, बेटे आज अलग ही लाइफ है, आज लाइट का अलग ही गेम है. हम इसको ऑर्गेनाइज ऐसे कर रहे हैं कि आज हम पढ़ रहे हैं वन, जो आर्किटेक्चर है हमारी साइकोलॉजी का बायोलॉजी में. हाउ डज बायोलॉजी इन्फॉर्म आवर साइकोलॉजी? The second thing we'll study is what is the outer boundary of psychology, which has to do with evolution, which is also a biological process. So today, roughly, we'll focus on the biological element. Tomorrow, we move on to one, मेरे दिमाग में चीजें प्रोसेस कैसे होती हैं, cognitive psychology and social psychology. मैं अपनी सोसाइटी से इंटरेक्ट कैसे करता हूं. So अभी तक हमने, by the time we are end of day 2, we would have covered कि biological architecture क्या है दिमाग का, क्या reasons हैं, क्या rationales हैं मेरे behavior के outer limit के लिए. मैं उड़ नहीं सकता, मेरे पास पंख नहीं है, मेरी बायोलॉजी की लिमिटेशन है. सेम साइकोलॉजी में ऐसी लिमिटेशंस क्या है या प्रीडिस्पोजिशंस क्या है? प्रीडिस्पोजिशन मतलब डिफॉल्ट हैबिट्स. फिर हम सोशल साइकोलॉजी पढ़ेंगे. हाउ डज अ पर्सन इंटरैक्ट विद द पीपल अराउंड इटसेल्फ? हाउ डज अ पर्सन अंडरस्टैंड हिमसेल्फ एंड हिज बिहेवियर इन सोसाइटी? एंड देन कॉग्निटिव साइकोलॉजी, व्हिच इज चीजें प्रोसेस भी कैसे होती हैं दिमाग में. एंड डे 3 वी स्टार्ट टू आस्क द क्वेश्चन, हु एम आई? We start to ask the question, who am I? So we do the outer boundaries, we do everything in the middle, and then we do the dead middle point, which is you. Who am I? That is roughly the idea, and we'll have to cover in this process, one, how experiments are done, and how to read a scientific paper. That is roughly going to be what we talk about. But no more of this slideshow. Let's move on. Before we begin our discussion about neurotransmitters, which forms sort of the biological basis for a lot of the psychological processes that happen in our head. We don't want to get too much into neuroscience, VMPC, PMFC. We don't want to get into all of that. We'll just talk about what happens in those areas. And that has to do with neurotransmitters. That has to do with hormones going through several different neurons. तुम्हारे nerves are made of small neurons. एक न्यूरॉन से दूसरे न्यूरॉन से तीसरे न्यूरॉन बॉडी में फैलता चला जाता है ब्लड के थ्रू, आपस में न्यूरॉन्स के थ्रू. And what happens is it produces a specific kind of a behavior. And the idea is very simple. The idea is almost intuitive. बच्चा खुद दिमाग से भी लगा लेता है ये, कि मेरी बॉडी में कुछ हो रहा है जो मेरे कॉग्निशन को, मेरे सोचने को, मेरे समझने को इन्फ्लुएंस कर रहा है, मेरे ख्यालों को इन्फ्लुएंस कर रहा है. This is very often a mistake you'll find spiritualists make. They don't consider biology at all. Or in fact, even self-help guys. They don't consider biology at all. They don't consider that you are coded, तुम्हारा एक base code है. They don't talk about it. They think mind is infinitely malleable. कुछ भी बना दो दिमाग को. ये क्यों नहीं मान लेते? हम लड़ाई क्यों नहीं करते लोगों से? हम सबसे दोस्ती क्यों नहीं कर लेते? Why don't we make friends with everybody? Because your biology doesn't work like that. And neither does your psychology. It does not. That's not how you were programmed. You were programmed in competition. You were programmed in violence. That is your base code. If we are Windows, whatever is working right now, back when we were Windows 95, we were fighting. That's what you're made out of. What are you going to do? How are you going to make it disappear? This is this wishful thinking that people who don't give enough thought to their ideas have. That does not mean you can be non-violent throughout your life. There's enough people who never fight. That's a separate question. We'll come to that as well. Give me a sec. Yo, Tag Mango, I'm getting more messages that Tag Mango is not working.
Yeah, Prakhar, we're looking into it. Everybody, in case somebody asks, we will also share on the group that the email has been sent. So the link is there. Yeah.
Adarsh, handle karo. मेरे socials पे handle करो इस चीज को. मेरे पास time नहीं है. Right. And for you to understand how biology plays a role in psychology, you have to understand this simple chess analogy. क्योंकि आइडिया क्या है ब्रो? हम 6 हार्मोन की बात कर सकते हैं, हम 5 पार्ट्स ऑफ द ब्रेन की बात कर सकते हैं, पर बिहेवियर इन्फिनिट है. बिहेवियर तो अलग अलग डायरेक्शन में जा रहा है यार. कुछ भी कर रहे हैं, कुछ भी सोच रहे हैं हम, ख्याल तो इन्फिनिट वेरिएशन में है, बट हार्मोन 5 ही हैं. हैप्पीनेस के भी 6 फॉर्म होते हैं. लोग क्या बोलते थे? डोपामिन चेप दो सब चीजों पे. डोपामिन है जी, डोपामिन. कैसे? How is it that if biology is the basis of psychology, this is infinite and this is finite? And for that, you need to understand something as simple as chess. Who here played chess? Chat में लिख के बताओ. Who here ever played chess? Be that post समय रहना or pre समय रहना. Whoever's played chess, you will get this spot on. Right? The idea is chess has only so many rules. Your pawns move this way, your knights move this way, your bishops move this way. Finite number of rules. But within the first 8 moves of a chess game, there is millions of different games that can happen. Millions of different positions in the first 8 moves itself. If you ever watch, there's a very famous chess YouTuber, his name's Agad Mator. Whenever he's analyzing a game, he'll come to a point where he'll be like, at this point, we have a completely new game. That this position has never been reached in 200 years of recorded chess history. Imagine how many recorded chess games are happening all the time, everywhere. People note their games down. And yet still, that is how interesting complexity from simplicity can be. A few simple rules can create extremely complex phenomena. Few extremely simple algorithmic rules can create extremely complex and variable phenomena. You need to understand this chess analogy. Isko packet bana lo apne dimag mein. At many points throughout this discussion, when we address the infinite nature of human behavior and human thought, we'll use this analogy. Because what we are getting at is the simple rules. Behavior to hum dekh sakte hain na. News kholo, TV kholo, movies kholo, books uthao. You'll just find, acha, behavior ye hai. Uski wajah kya hai? What are those simple rules at the background? That is sort of what we're trying to understand in so many ways. That is sort of what we're trying to get at in so many ways. All right. Is this chess analogy clear? Do you understand? कॉम्प्लेक्सिटी साइंसेस समझ में आ रही है? इस पूरे फील्ड को बाय द वे कॉम्प्लेक्सिटी साइंसेस कहते हैं, जहां पे स्टडी किया जाता है कि कौन से वो बेस 4 5 8 रूल हैं और वो किस तरीके से इंटरेक्ट कर रहे हैं कॉम्प्लेक्स सिस्टम्स बनाने के लिए. Do you understand complexity science? Let me just check. And right, okay. Most of you do. Very good. Very cool. Very cool. Right. So let's move on to discussing about neurotransmitters. The function of neurotransmitters is very simple. Move from one neuron to another, reach the brain, activate a certain part. That activation causes a certain behavior, certain thought. The funny part is we don't know exactly how. The funny part is, as scientists, we don't understand how the brain, जो ये physical organ है, मेरे skull के नीचे, जो यहाँ पे physical organ है, we don't know how that becomes the mind, what I'm experiencing. We don't know. We don't know how this physical organ creates this movie in front of my eyes that I'm watching. We have some idea. बहुत थोड़ा idea है हमें. और उस थोड़े आइडिया में भी इतनी कॉम्प्लिकेशन और इतनी डिस्टॉर्शन है कि आदमी को वो आइडिया कभी कोई समझने देता ही नहीं. Let's take the most common neurotransmitter / hormone dopamine into example. Understand, these neurotransmitters are messengers. एक न्यूरॉन से दूसरे न्यूरॉन से तीसरे न्यूरॉन भाग के गए दिमाग तक, एक रिसेप्टर पे बाइंड किए, बूम, एक नया इमोशन क्रिएट, एक नया एक्सपीरियंस क्रिएट किया. What is the conventional view that gets passed on about dopamine? Dopamine is a happiness hormone. उससे तुम्हें हैप्पीनेस मिलती है. फिर क्या बोलेंगे, अच्छा फिर अब तुम्हारी हैप्पीनेस यहां वहां, तुम्हें इंस्टाग्राम से हैप्पीनेस मिल रही है और तुम्हें ट्विटर से हैप्पीनेस मिल रही है और सोशल वैलिडेशन से हैप्पीनेस मिल रही है, तो एक काम करो, तुम डोपामिन डिटॉक्स कर लो. और डोपामिन डिटॉक्स कुछ एक्सट्रीम लाइक फोन ऑफ कर दो, एटसेट्रा एटसेट्रा. आदमी क्या बोलता है, अच्छा मैं अपना डोपामिन मिटा दूंगा. एज इफ डोपामिन आया तो खुशी हुई, अब डोपामिन से अपने आप को रोक दिया तो उस खुशी की आदत खत्म हो जाएगी और फिर वो डोपामिन की जरूरत नहीं पड़ेगी मेरे को. There is only probably one part of it that is right in this entire explanation, which is कि जो अगर मैं डोपामिन से खुद को रोक लूंगा तो मेरे को उसकी आदत नहीं रहेगी. But let's try and understand what dopamine actually does, because dopamine's not about happiness. Dopamine's about motivation. Dopamine's about motivation. And if you listen carefully about what I'm going to explain next, maybe you'll understand almost everything you need to know about motivation. Maybe you'll never have to go to YouTube and look up, motivational videos after this. Because the reason why you get motivated is dopamine. And this is how they found out. This is how scientists figured this out. Here's what scientists did, okay? They kept a monkey. Let me pull up that visual so you see what that looks like. They kept a monkey. They had the monkey sit down on a chair. They tied him to that bloody chair. They were like, monkey, chair pe baitho. And then they said, hold up, let me just make this bigger so you can see this better. They were like, monkey, ये restraint chair पे बैठा हुआ है. Restraint chair पे बैठा हुआ है, he cannot move. इसके सर पे ये रिकॉर्डिंग इलेक्ट्रोड है, ये देखने के लिए कि इसके दिमाग में कब डोपामिन फ्लश हो रहा है, कब डोपामिन निकल रहा है इसके दिमाग से. सामने एक स्क्रीन है जिसपे एक स्टिमुलस आता है. स्टिमुलस समझते हो कि कोई भी ऐसी चीज होती है जो उसे बोलती है भाई अब एक्शन करना है, कुछ करना है. जैसे ही वो स्टिमुलस आता है, मंकी को क्या करना है, सामने वाले अपने रिस्पॉन्स बार को दबाना है. और अगर उसने स्टिमुलस देख के रिस्पॉन्स बार दबा दिया तो उसको जूस मिलेगा. योर स्टैंडर्ड थ्योरी अराउंड डोपामिन वुड से कि भाई अब उसको जूस मिल गया, रिवॉर्ड मिल गया, तो उसे खुशी होनी चाहिए. हम यही सोचते हैं ना. आदमी को जीतने के बाद खुशी होती है, आदमी को जब रिवॉर्ड मिल जाता है, आदमी जब गाड़ी ले आता है, आदमी जब वेकेशन पे चला जाता है, आदमी जब आई डोंट नो प्यार में पड़ जाता है, कुछ भी, आदमी जब लाइफ में फोड़ देता है, आदमी जब पैसे बना लेता है, तब खुशी होती है. यही तो हो रहा है. बाहर की जिंदगी स्टिमुलस है, तुम्हारे एक्शन रिस्पॉन्स हैं, तुम जीत गए तो तुम्हें जूस मिलेगा. वो जूस पैसा हो सकता है, वो जूस सेक्स हो सकता है, वो जूस स्टेटस हो सकता है, वो जूस किसी टाइप की खुशी हो सकती है, इंस्टाग्राम पे पिक्चर्स हो सकती हैं, और वो जूस मिलेगा तो भाई फिर तो खुशी होगी. They tried to run this experiment, and here is what they found. The first time The first time that the monkey went through that experiment, he actually did exactly feel that way. The first time the monkey did the experiment, he did exactly feel that way. पहली बार में monkey को, this is actually slide 2, पहली बार में monkey को खुशी होती ही रिवॉर्ड के बाद है. इसको इग्नोर करना, अभी जो तुम देख रहे हो उसको समझाऊंगा मैं. पहली बार में मंकी को खुशी होती ही रिवॉर्ड के बाद है, क्योंकि उसको पता नहीं क्या होना है. उसने देखी लाइट स्क्रीन पे, उसने दबाया बटन, उसने देखी लाइट स्क्रीन पे, उसने दबाया बटन, उसको मिला जूस, कहता है ओ माय गॉड ये क्या हो रहा है. खुशी. द फर्स्ट टाइम यू डू समथिंग, हैप्पीनेस कम्स आफ्टर द रिवॉर्ड. बट वेरी क्विकली you understand you can do it. Very quickly, the monkey understood, I can do it. And as soon as the monkey understood he could do it, as soon as there was a signal the next time, the monkey already got happy. As soon as he knew the game is about to begin, the monkey felt happiness. The monkey is like, end mein reward milega. So his body is like, abhi khushi le le aur ye kaam khatam kar de. It's almost like an advance your body pays you. वो रिवॉर्ड चाहिए ना, खाना चाहिए ना, सेक्स चाहिए ना, स्टेटस चाहिए ना, पैसे चाहिए ना, ले अभी खुशी का रिवॉर्ड ले. उस खुशी को मोटिवेशन कहते हैं. This is where the story begins as far as neurotransmitters are concerned. You get this wave of happiness as soon as you enter the game, as soon as you know the game has begun. If you want to be slightly introspective and me to be slightly harsher, think about all the times you were switching on something like Instagram. तुम्हें वो फोटोज देखने के बाद खुशी नहीं मिलती. पहली बार इंस्टाग्राम खोलने पे ओ माय गॉड सुंदर लोग, बढ़िया वेकेशन, दिस दैट. उसके बाद तुम इंस्टाग्राम खोलते आउट ऑफ दैट खुशी हो, तुम्हें पता ही नहीं चलता. Dopamine is like this guiding compass that tells you what direction you need to act in. It provides you motivation to do different kinds of stuff. The next time they found out, the second time they ran this experiment, they found out कि भाई the body wait नहीं कर रही reward का to give it actual खुशी. Body signal पे ही खुशी दे रही है. And advance against the future. Because the body knows तू reward पकड़ लेगा दोस्त. So he's happy while he's entering. And before the work is done, it sort of starts to come down also. By the time reward आता है, कोई खुशी नहीं है. This is the same thing that happens with you when you're going on a trip or when you're buying new clothes. When you're going to do that, you're like बहुत मजे आएंगे, ट्रिप पे जाएंगे, बहुत मजे आएंगे, बहुत दिनों से वेट कर रहा हूं. And then you go there, it's normal. When you're booking your flights, you're very happy. When you're booking your hotels, you're very happy. When you're deciding this is going to happen, you're very happy. When you're like, oh, मैं date पे जाऊंगा, you're very happy. As soon as you get there, it's normal. It's normal. You touch baseline again. So the scientists were very worried. They were like, अरे हम तो सोच रहे थे कि यार dopamine से happiness produce होती है, but ये तो advanced happiness है. This is motivation. Wait, let's try something new with this. इन्होंने बोला इस बार हम क्या करेंगे, बंदर जितनी बार भी रिस्पॉन्स बार दबाएगा ना, हम उसके 50% टाइम्स ही उसको रिवॉर्ड देंगे. हम उसको देंगे ही नहीं 100% टाइम रिवॉर्ड. एंड दे थॉट, अब भाई अगर बंदर को पता है 50% टाइम ही रिवॉर्ड मिलने वाला है, बंदर की हैप्पीनेस लेवल कम हो जाने चाहिए. अब रिवॉर्ड थोड़ी मिल रहा है, अब 50% टाइम रिवॉर्ड मिल रहा है. पहले मंकी यूज्ड टू होगा, अच्छा ओ मेरे को रिवॉर्ड नहीं मिल रहा. अब मंकी को पता है मेरे को सिर्फ 50% रफली एक रैंडम सेंस में रिवॉर्ड मिल रहा है. मंकी शुड बी लाइक यार ये तो अनफेयर गेम है, मेरे को रिवॉर्ड नहीं मिल रहा. बट दिस इज व्हाट दे फाउंड. At 50%, happiness almost doubled. They found motivation doubled as soon as you introduced randomness into the game. That the monkey is more motivated. Monkey is going crazy pressing that response bar. मेरे को जूस दो, मेरे को जूस दो, मेरे को जूस दो. What a day, huh? So they were like, "Arey, this is so interesting. अगर हमने 50% randomness, कि 50% of the times you try and play a game, 50% of the times you try and ace an exam, 50% of the times you try and work out and make that body, 50% of the times you try and get that date with that dude or that girl or whatever. If we make the odds 50%, people are just much more excited. They want to do it more and more. And then they tried 75 and 25%. And they found nothing beats absolute randomness. So just so that somebody does not know how to read graphs, this is the 100% line. 100% times reward मिल रहा है, least motivation. Then 25 and 75 में इतनी motivation आ रही है. और 50% जो absolute randomness है, उसमें इतनी ज्यादा मोटिवेशन आ रही है. And if any of you have ever been to a place like Goa or Las Vegas जहां पे लोग casinos खेलते हैं, even Northeast में, and if you've ever seen that slot machine in a movie, this is the principle it works on, intermittent reward. कि इंसान को 100% रिवॉर्ड मत दो, वो खेलेगा नहीं, वो बोर मार जाएगा. If the game is too easy, you will never be motivated long enough. The game needs some amount of randomness. It needs some amount of chance. And as soon as there is a chance introduced, as soon as there is a possibility that you will not get what you came in for, you lose your mind. You get so addicted to that. It's about finding, in some human sense, finding the perfect challenge. यहां पे monkey की बात कर रहे हैं. This was the brilliant idea that these scientists discovered. And they found out dopamine had nothing to do with happiness, it had everything to do with anticipation of reward, or can be understood as motivation. And for motivation, there is a few components. One of them is the game. The other is that the game needs randomness. So every time you think about being afraid, oh my God, I don't want to do this, I might fail. Believe me, you're going to like the game in which there is a possibility to fail. Do it. You're holding yourself back. You're holding yourself back. With that, let's try and understand what dopamine detox is supposed to be about. Because, see, how can you be zero on dopamine? If you were zero on dopamine, you'd have no reason to do anything at all. Think of dopamine as if मैं अगर इस रूम में बैठा हूं, तुम अपने रूम में बैठे हो, तो इस रूम में एक इनविजिबल कहीं पे चीनी गिरी पड़ी है जिसकी तरफ मैं ऑटोमेटिकली चल के जाऊंगा. वो चीनी डोपामीन है. इनविजिबल चीनी है, मेरे को पता नहीं है वहां चीनी है, बट जिस डायरेक्शन में भी मैं मूव कर रहा हूं ना, जो भी मैं कर रहा हूं, जो भी मैं एग्जीक्यूट कर रहा हूं, जैसे भी मैं एग्जीक्यूट कर रहा हूं, इज पार्टली बिकॉज ऑफ डोपामीन. सो यू कैनॉट बी जीरो ऑन डोपामीन बिकॉज देन यू जस्ट खत्म, एंड ऑफ इट. एंड इन फैक्ट very little dopamine is related with a lot of like mental disorders. That does not, nobody just, ऐसा नहीं होता dopamine detox में कि अरे हमारे में dopamine खत्म हो जाएगा. That's not what almost anybody is going for. That's corrupted information you get on YouTube because memes are easier to sell than ideas. With dopamine detox, your purpose is this. Your purpose is to, well, demolish all associations that your dopaminergic system has with the outside world. क्योंकि तुम्हें पता नहीं चला है कब कब में तुम्हारी एक वो सिंपल बिहेवियर होता है ना, आदमी जाता है फ्रिज खोल के देखता है, फ्रिज बंद करता है, वापस आ जाता है, फिर थोड़ी देर में जाता है फ्रिज खोल के देखता है, फ्रिज बंद करता है, वापस आ जाता है. सेम चीज हम इंस्टाग्राम के साथ करते हैं, ट्विटर के साथ करते हैं, थोड़ी थोड़ी देर में खोल के देखते हैं. ऐसा नहीं है डोपामिन तब मिल रहा है जब मैं फ्रिज खोल रहा हूं. फ्रिज खोल के तो डिसअपॉइंट हो रहा हूं, कुछ भी नहीं है. इंस्टाग्राम खोल के तो गाली दे रहा हूं खुद को, फिर खोल लिया, कुछ भी नहीं है. It is this association that I don't even notice before I open Instagram and before I open the fridge that gets me to that place that needs to be killed off. But here is the funny part. Dopamine's involved with everything from talking to moving to writing to everything. All the things that you do has dopaminergic elements underneath. The good things and the bad things. The good things and the bad things. So you can't divide yourself of dopamine. What you need to do is be in an environment where you are so alone, because even meeting people is dopaminergic. कि तुम्हारे धीमे धीमे करके जितने कनेक्शंस बने हुए हैं डोपामीन के साथ, वो एक्सटिंक्ट हो जाएं, ताकि तुम अब एक दोबारा फ्रेश कनेक्शन बिल्डिंग कर सको, अवेयर होके कि ओ मेरा डोपामीन का ये सिस्टम है, मैं इस चीज के साथ अटैच हो रहा हूं, whether that be Instagram, whether that be X, whether that be Y. So that is why I say when you want to do a dopamine detox, one of the best ways to do is a meditation retreat like Vipassana. 10 दिन तुम बोलोगे नहीं, किसी से मिलोगे नहीं, किसी की आंखों में नहीं देखोगे, कुछ नहीं, खत्म. सारा डोपामीन, जो भी तुम्हारी नीड है डोपामीन की, वो खत्म. फिर जो तुम्हारी इच्छा होती है ना बोलने की, मैं कुछ बोलना चाहता हूं, मैं कुछ करना चाहता हूं, अरे इससे बात करूं, जो भी उस दौरान होता है, वो बेसिकली, और द एंजाइटी बिफोर हैंड कि मैं जाऊंगा तो क्या होगा, विल आई बी एबल टू स्टे साइलेंट फॉर 10 days and so on, that's all dopamine talking to you. That's all dopamine. You're worried I'm going to have an absence of dopamine in the future. You're worried I'm going to have an absence of dopamine in the future. Or once you're there, there is this need for dopamine, so you want to talk to people. There's this need for dopamine, so you want to write or read or whatever. Because reading also involves dopamine. Here's the funny part. On one side, there is people who won't tell you exactly what dopamine is. On the other side, there is people who like dopamine matlab happiness. And this you need to understand with all biology of psychology. Biology does not understand. Biology guides human behavior, but it does not understand the world. तुम्हारे डोपामिन को क्या पता अच्छा क्या है, इंस्टाग्राम अच्छा है, फ्रिज अच्छा है कि कुछ और अच्छा है, तुम्हारी डोपामिन को क्या पता? Humans are special in that way, where even after what is happening biologically, उसके ऊपर एक association है, एक logical association है, एक symbolic association है with good and bad, with right and wrong. This is what humans are capable of. ऐसा नहीं है dopamine will always make you do motivated good stuff. Dopamine might make you do horrible stuff that you regret later on. It depends on what is dopamine coded with. And as far as ये जो coded with वाला concept है ना, इस पे हम कल आएंगे when we talk about social psychology and we talk about classical conditioning with Skinner. But the idea is 2 or more things can be coded together. They can mean जैसे पैसा और status almost coded together है ना? पैसे को status और status को पैसे से हम confuse करते रहते हैं. अमीर आदमी को बड़ा आदमी, बड़े आदमी को अमीर आदमी बोलते रहते हैं. This is specific to humans. Very few other animals have that. जहां 2 concept जो kind of near एक दूसरे के हैं वो almost एक बन सकते हैं हमारे head में. तो Instagram somehow has become some kind of a reward mechanism, so you open it without knowing. Your dopamine's coded with Instagram. You're like, अरे Instagram मतलब dopamine. Whatever be that, about the aesthetics of Instagram, the notification system that provides validation, whatever. What a horrible bloody day to do this. My God. Anyway, we go on. The next neurotransmitter I want to talk to you about is serotonin. And serotonin's been made extremely famous with Jordan Peterson talking about serotonin as the victory hormone. And it's right. Serotonin is the victory hormone. Spot on. The purpose of serotonin, it is almost like, इसको तुम ऐसे समझो, म्यूजिक में माइक होता है, एम्पलीफायर होता है ना, कि तुम थोड़ा सा बोलो उस आवाज ऊपर या नीचे ले जा सकता है. It's the amplifier of a good life. High serotonin levels are the amplifier of a good life. If your serotonin levels are high, you feel happiness more and sadness less. कि जो तुम्हारा sad emotion भी है ना, उसका effect कम होगा. जो happy emotion है, उसका effect और भी ज्यादा होगा. If your serotonin levels are low, it's the opposite. Sadness amplify हो जाएगी और happiness contract हो जाएगी. That is roughly what serotonin does. And if you know about depression में जो antidepressants देते हैं, because depression is a stage where your body is not doing a good enough job with your serotonin. वो serotonin pass around नहीं कर रही है तो absorb नहीं हो रहा है, दिमाग तक नहीं पहुंच रहा है receptor तक. Receptor is the end in your brain जहां पे जाके वो hormone जाके बचता है कि अच्छा ये this is like it has reached your brain. That's the gateway into your brain. तो जो दवाइयां देते हैं ना antidepressants, they're supposed to act on your serotogenic system. और उसका पर्पस ये होता है कि जब एक न्यूरॉन से दूसरे न्यूरॉन तक सेरोटोनिन जा रहा हो तो वो बीच में ना फंस जाए, बस. तो और अब्जॉर्प्शन होगी ना बॉडी में, वो बीच में नहीं, न्यूरॉन्स के बीच वाले फ्लूइड में नहीं फंस रहा, बर्बाद नहीं हो रहा वहां पे. सेरोटोनिन इज द विक्ट्री हार्मोन. बट हियर्स द फनी पार्ट, फॉर ह्यूमंस इनवेरिएबली पब्लिक ओपिनियन एंड विक्ट्री गो हैंड इन हैंड. एंड व्हाट दैट मीन्स इज सेरोटोनिन ऑल्सो नॉट सुपरमैन, आउट एंड आउट बढ़िया, अरे वाह सेरोटोनिन होना चाहिए हाई. बिकॉज तुमने कभी देखा है, मतलब देखा छोड़ो, देखा तो तुमने देखा होगा ही, कभी तुमने खुद से पूछा है कि ये बेवकूफ आदमी स्टेज पे चढ़ के क्या क्या बोल जाते हैं यार. तुम पॉलिटिकली किसी से डिसएग्री करते हो, तुम मोदी से या गांधी से डिसएग्री करते हो, तुम देख रहे हो वो आदमी बोल रहा है, कहां से भाई, कहां से हिम्मत लाते हो ये बकवास करने की. कभी ऐसा हुआ है देख के किसी को यूट्यूब पे, टीवी पे? तुम्हारे लिए वो गलत है, हो सकता है वो गलत हो भी, उसकी पब्लिक के लिए वो ठीक है, तो उसकी बॉडी में सेरोटोनिन बज रहा है फुल पावर. उसके लिए वो विक्टर है भाई, उसके लिए उसने फोड़ लिया, उसके लिए उसे पता है उसने सही क्या करा है. He knows what he's talking about. Simple as that. That person knows what they're talking about. Because for humans, fundamentally, public opinion acts as a proxy, as a signal, as a symptom of victory. Very often, serotonin and public opinion go hand in hand. And sometimes victory is flipping the people off. Sometimes victory is just like all of you are wrong. But your serotonin is pointing in a different direction at that point. The third hormone I want to talk to you about is oxytocin. Oxytocin, you hear a lot about on Kunal Shah's tweets. Oxytocin, the love hormone. Well, not really the love hormone. What is love even? What is love, right? It's the relationship building hormone. Frankly, it's the relationship building hormone between mother and children. It's supposed to be that specific. उसके बाद हम लव को एज द एक्सपीरियंस ऑफ लव, जो प्यार में होता है, मैं तुम्हारे लिए चांद तारे तोड़ लाऊंगा, मैं तुम्हारे लिए ये कॉम्प्रोमाइज करूंगा, वो कॉम्प्रोमाइज करूंगा, जो ये वाली कहानी है, जो ये वाला किस्सा है, ये तो तुम ऐड कर देते हो, ये तुम्हारे एक्सपीरियंस में डेकोरेट होता है. बट फंडामेंटली ऑक्सीटोसिन का काम है रिलेशनशिप बिल्डिंग. एंड यू माइट फील लाइक, ओ फाइनली वी हैव कम अक्रॉस अ हार्मोन जिसके सारे काम बढ़िया हैं. अरे रिलेशनशिप बिल्डिंग में क्या प्रॉब्लम है? ह्यूमंस आर सोशल एनिमल्स, इनको जरूरत है रिलेशनशिप बिल्डिंग की. बट दिस इज, एंड यू नो दे हैव रन दिस एक्सपेरिमेंट. दिस इज व्हाट दे विल डू. They'll take a nasal oxytocin spray and spray it up your nose, और सीधा दिमाग में हिट आएगी ऑक्सीटोसिन की, और तुम्हें तुम्हारे सामने एक अट्रैक्टिव लड़का है लड़की खड़ा कर देंगे, प्यार खत्म. लाइक दिस गाय इज लाइक, अब मेरे को प्यार हो गया, अब मैं कुछ नहीं कर सकता. बिकॉज दैट्स व्हाट ऑक्सीटोसिन डज. देयर इज अ रीजन व्हाई व्हेन वी लुक एट किड्स वी नोटिस देयर आईज फर्स्ट. इसकी आंखें कितनी प्यारी हैं, बिल्कुल पापा पे गई हैं. वो पापा पे गई हैं का अलग वजह है, वो पापा को कंफर्म करना है तुम्हारा ही बच्चा है. ये इसमें भी एक स्टडी हो रखी है एवोल्यूशनरी साइकोलॉजी में. व्हाई डू पीपल ऑलवेज रेफर टू द चाइल्ड विद द फादर? बिकॉज मदर का तो पक्का है उसका है, लेकिन बाप का पक्का नहीं होता कभी. बट इट्स ऑलवेज द आईज यू आर लुकिंग एट. सच प्रिटी आईज, सच ब्यूटीफुल आईज. व्हाट इज सो स्पेशल अबाउट द आईज? एंड इट्स नॉट जस्ट बेबीज, इट्स ऑल्सो डॉग्स. इट्स वेरी इंटरेस्टिंग थिंग हैपेंड द अदर डे. टिल्लू, मेरा कुत्ता टिल्लू, कम्स एंड लाइज ओवर मी. टिल्लूज, उसको रात को चाहिए होता है कोई गुदी गुदी करे, उसको सुलाए. मैं उसको सुला रहा था. आई मेड अ वीडियो एंड आई सेंट इट टू अ फ्यू ऑफ माय फ्रेंड्स एंड वन ऑफ देम रिस्पॉन्ड्स, इसकी आंखें कितनी इंसानों जैसी है. बताओ, कुत्ते की आंखें इंसानों जैसी हो सकती हैं? पर आदमी को नशा हो रखा है किस चीज का? ऑक्सीटोसिन का. ऑक्सीटोसिन लाइक दैट. ऑक्सीटोसिन इज अ रिलेशनशिप बिल्डिंग hormone, and the way it works is eye contact, is physical touch, is hugging, is kissing, is those things, is holding hands, the kind of shit that you do when you're in a relationship. You know, जो बेसिक स्टफ होता है, बचपन में हम टेक्सटिंग करते थे ना, ओ hugs XX, kisses XX, like दूर से ही हम लोग hugs डिजिटली पास ऑन कर रहे हैं. हो, महसूस क्या कर रहे हो जब तुम इमेजिन कर रहे हो अपने इनविजिबल बॉयफ्रेंड गर्लफ्रेंड को हक करते हुए? तुम्हारे दिमाग में ऑक्सीटोसिन का नशा मार रहा है. But here is what they found. You might think this is also great. अरे हक करो, ऑक्सीटोसिन फैलाओ, बिल्कुल बहुत बढ़िया बात है. But here is the downside with oxytocin. They found that dog mothers, and dog mothers मतलब इंसान, dog mothers नहीं, dogs की माँ, जो कुत्तों में इन्होंने स्टडी करी थी कि अगर तुम कुत्तों को ऑक्सीटोसिन स्प्रे मारो नेजली, वो ऑक्सीटोसिन हाई है, और फिर तुम उनके बच्चों के पास जाने की कोशिश करो, कुत्ते आर जस्ट सो मच मोर एंग्रियर अबाउट इट. They get violent. Love, or at least the form of love that oxytocin is concerned with, also produces violence in defense of that love, in defense of that relationship. Higher levels of oxytocin, like I say very often in my streams, जो मैं privately art of conversation की करता हूँ about say my family or for that matter my friends, I'm like, विनम्र के लिए मैं मार भी दूंगा और मर भी जाऊंगा. Where is that? What is that emotion? वो कहाँ है? वो oxytocin है. और सच में like पूछ लो मेरे से, अभी भी बता देता हूँ, चढ़ जाऊंगा किसी पे, हाथ लगा के देखे कोई मेरे भाई को. समझ रहे हो? ये जो, अरे कुछ दिन पहले this happened. And so the funny part about this is that dogs are very much like humans in that way. Like कुत्तों ने बहुत पहले रियलाइज कर लिया, भाई इंसानों के पास ये ऑक्सीटोसिन वाला सिस्टम है, इसको हैक कर लो. So when we look at dogs, we basically see kids. That's why my friend was like, oh टिल्लू देखो कैसे उसकी इंसानों वाली आंखें हैं. Because dogs have hacked into our neurochemistry to form that relationship with us. Right? So this other day I was working out in my garden and we'd been hearing for a very long time कि कोई बिल्ली है जो टिल्लू से बड़ी है और टिल्लू को खा जाएगी, तो टिल्लू को बाहर मत जाने दो. मैं वर्कआउट कर रहा हूँ, बढ़िया अपने गाने सुन रहा हूँ, या अचानक एक बिल्ली मेरे सामने आती है. एंड बिफोर आई न्यू इट आई रैन आफ्टर दैट बिल्ली की मैं तेरी जान ही ले लूंगा अभी. सोचो 6 महीने हुए मेरे को इस कुत्ते के साथ रहते हुए, सिर्फ उसकी आंखों में देख के उसको इंसान बना दिया. मैं उससे बात करता रहूंगा, और टिल्लू तू कैसा है? What is that? That's oxytocin talking. That's what oxytocin does. It helps you in building relationships. That's why dogs want to be around you and want to be touched and like tickled and like, you know, उनके दिमाग में oxytocin release हो रहा है उस time. It's all oxytocin. But oxytocin makes you both fall in love, quote unquote, build a relationship and become violent about it. Then there is endorphins, and endorphins you've heard of as well. The list is very basic, but try and follow the logic. Endorphins is your body's way of saying good job, तुमने अपनी physical body को मेहनत कराई. You put your body under stress, good job. And if you notice, endorphin तुम्हारे सिस्टम में है भी क्यों, तुम्हारी बॉडी में तुम्हारी खुशी को endorphin इफेक्ट भी क्यों करता है? Because that is nature's way of saying मेहनत कर. Go out, do some stuff, run, lift a rock, do shit in the physical environment. When you sit at home and play video games, and video games are a good analogy to real life, because video games can produce almost all of the same hormonal responses except endorphins. They're not very good with producing endorphins in you. Physical labor kuch nahi ho raha. There is no physical labor involved. When you run, when you swim, when you work out and you're coming home, and follow this very carefully. When you work out and you're coming home, you're like, yeah, I got it. I ran so much or whatever. That's endorphin. When people break up, they go through an oxytocin withdrawal. अब मैं उसकी आंखों में नहीं देखता, वो मेरी आंखों में नहीं देखती. देखती भी है तो नफरत दिखती है, प्यार दिखता ही नहीं. अब ऑक्सीटोसिन दो, मेरे को उसकी याद आ रही है, मैसेज कर दिया, वेट करते हुए उस सेम इमोशनल रिस्पॉन्स की जिससे ऑक्सीटोसिन है. One of the better ways in which people counteract this need for oxytocin is by producing endorphins. They go work out. They start doing something in the outside. Career पे focus करने लगेंगे, body पे focus करने लगेंगे. They'll give themselves endorphin instead. They'll give themselves dopamine instead. This is something you do subconsciously all the time. When you're low on motivation, you go out and run, you get endorphins. You're like, you know what? Maybe I can do more stuff now. It's great. Your biology is programmed to handle you on all fronts. अपनी बॉडी को स्ट्रेस में डालो, स्ट्रेस से निकलोगे, अपने आप बॉडी बोलेगी शाबाश, गुड जॉब, you deserve happiness, you deserve a reward. But here is the problem. Something I don't know if you're aware of, is very common, more common in girls than boys, but very common. There is this thing called self-harm. And people are addicted to self-harm. People will cut themselves slightly, let themselves bleed and enjoy it. And everybody else on the outside is like, why are they so crazy? Why are they cutting themselves? What does this even mean? Parents don't get it. Your friends don't get it. So you have to hide it. But what is really happening is you're addicted to endorphins. As soon as you cut yourself and you survive, your body's like, good job. Because body ko nahi pata. Biology does not understand the outside world. Biology is like, stress aaya. Reward to dena hoga. That's what's happening with self-harm. That is what's happening. That is, in fact, sometimes what is happening when you put yourself through extreme physical pain of some sort. That is probably what David Goggins enjoys the most. Is a good rush of endorphins, man. I put myself through stuff. There is one more neurotransmitter. Like, you've heard of the name. It's called adrenaline. And adrenaline ka function is very simple. If you're in danger, your body's like, listen, bro, you need to go super sane right now. You need to go super sane because you don't know what you'll need. You might have to fight. You might have to freeze and hide. And you might have to run. You might have to do anything, but you need to go super sane right now. You need to go level 2. You're operating at level 1. You need level 2. And that level 2 system is facilitated by adrenaline. It produces functions like your blood starts flowing faster. It goes to all the critical organs, your stomach, your head, all that stuff. You automatically focus. This one time, 2016. This is July 2016, so almost about 5 years ago. Vinamra and I were in Hampi. Hampi is this small little like temple town north from Bangalore, right? Or वहाँ there's a lot of chattane, pathar, rocks, like huge rock hills. So ऐसे जैसे नमक के ढेरे की तरह rocks पड़े होते हैं और उन पे वो hill बनी हुई है. So Vinamra and I, we were climbing this random hill. And it's very beautiful because if you climb those hills, there is obviously no railing. You're climbing on a boulder and then you're climbing on a boulder on top of it. You're climbing on a boulder on top of it. It looks like Flintstones. It looks like एक किसी hill के पीछे से अभी एक dinosaur बाहर निकल आएगा. That is sort of the environment. And we're just walking and we're talking about dinosaurs. Bro, यहाँ dinosaur निकल आया तो ha, how funny, prakhar, dinosaur निकल आया, ha. And अचानक Vinamra stops and he's like, prakhar, सांप. And before we know it, before we can even be of senses again, before even हम लोग जमीन पे हम भाग के कहीं और पहुंच चुके थे. We ran for 3 minutes straight non-stop as soon as he said सांप. And as soon as I got नीचे, जब हम नीचे पहुंचे उस हिल से, मैंने बोला क्या हुआ, हम भाग क्यों रहे हैं? And he's like, भाई वहां सांप था. मेरे को रियलाइज भी नहीं हुआ था मैं क्यों भाग रहा हूं. मेरे को सांप नहीं सुनाई दिया था जब विनम्र ने सांप बोला था. मेरे को सुनाई दिया था उसके चेहरे पे डेंजर. एंड मेरी बॉडी ने बोला एड्रेनलिन फेंक एंड रन. उस मोमेंट में मेरे को ये भी नहीं लगा मैं भाग क्यों रहा हूं. ओनली व्हेन आई केम डाउन एंड आई वाज सेफ, आई वाज लाइक, किस कलर का था वो सांप, कौन सा सांप? एंड देन विनम्र स्टार्ट्स डिस्क्राइबिंग दैट सांप एंड आई एम लाइक, ब्रो ये सांप नहीं, कपड़ा लग रहा है सुनने में. ब्लू कलर का था, उसकी आंखें रेड थी. आई वाज लाइक, यो, यू आर लेटिंग योर इमेजिनेशन रन वाइल्ड. But two grown ass men, none of which really saw the sap, ran for minutes before even they realized कि हम भाग क्यों रहे हैं भाई, क्या हो रहा है. This is the same thing that goes through your head as soon as you realize shit is about to go down, like you're about to enter a fight. स्कूल में अगर किसी की लड़ाई झगड़े हुए हो, कभी भी लड़ाई झगड़े होने वाले होते हैं पापा के साथ, मम्मी के साथ, और सडनली हार्ट बीट तेज होनी शुरू हो जाती है एंड यू फील लाइक ब्लड तुम्हारे सिस्टम से कहीं भाग रहा है एंड तुम्हारे पैर थोड़े जिटरी से होने शुरू हो जाते हैं. वो गाना नहीं है, palms are sweaty, knees weak, are heavy, वो vomit on my sweater already हटा दो, बट उससे पहले वाला पार्ट, that's just describing a basic adrenaline response. And this is, by the way, the same neurotransmitter that is going through your system when you're trying to talk to a cute girl or a cute boy. That's why you're nervous. You're not really nervous. Your body is thinking, oh my God, something dangerous is about to happen. So it's taking away blood from everywhere else and putting it in the important organs. And you need your tongue to be working fine to talk around that time. So you're just either frozen or you run away. Or you get like macho, too macho. Oh, मैं ये कर दूंगा, मैं वो कर दूंगा. Those are the three responses you have: fight, flight, freeze. That's what adrenaline does. That's simply what adrenaline does. And then there is finally cortisol. And cortisol is the number one villain in all binary neurotransmitter discussion. Oh, cortisol, stress hormone, stress hormone. एजिंग हो जाती है, गट इन्फ्लेमेशन हो जाती है इससे. अगर आपको स्ट्रेस है मतलब आपके cortisol levels हाई हैं. Fair, yeah, that's true. But वो स्ट्रेस है क्या? That answer lies in understanding what cortisol is. Cortisol is the wakefulness hormone. जब तुम नींद से सुबह उठते हो ना, तो तुम्हारे दिमाग में cortisol आता है. It tells you you can wake up. It creates this awake state in you. You are awake because of cortisol. And when you are too awake, you are too focused on everything that is happening around you. You are constantly wondering kuch galat na ho jaye, kuch. That is a situation of stress. When you are too awake, when you're excessively awake, when you're more awake than you should be. And so the idea when you talk about the biology of psychology is that, of course, psychology is affected by biology. There is biological reasons why things happen, but they're not 1:1. They're not linear. They're not to be understood. Oh, acha ye hua isliye ye hua, ye hua isliye ye hua. Humans are complex. Humans are complex, and almost nothing about our biology is either positive or negative. It's always neutral. If you noticed the entire argument about each and every, and we'll go over it again, each and every neurotransmitter, you'd have noticed कि difference ये है कि ये neurotransmitter coded किस चीज के साथ है. Is it coded with the right things? Then it'll give me right motivation. Then it'll give me right victory. Then it'll give me right love. Or is it coded with the wrong things? Of course, there's exceptions, but generally, and ये जो coding का process है, this process of coding we'll address tomorrow, is super, 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 super uniquely human. Absolutely uniquely human. So going back to the chess analogy we made initially, the simple rules of human behavior have to do with these and more of such neurotransmitters, these and more of such hormones. But they form extremely complex behaviors that you see all around you. These 6 rules and a few more, whatever, when they interact, because they don't behave independently. Independent थोड़ी behavior होता है कोई. ऐसा थोड़ी है कि अभी सिर्फ बॉडी में डोपामिन है, 2 मिनट बाद सेरोटोनिन आएगा. They form extremely complex behavior. And that complex behavior ka spectrum looks like what you do on an everyday level. Everything you do is because of a hormone. But it's not just because of a hormone. It's also because of what is it coded with. And we'll address that part tomorrow. But all your actions are because of some hormone kicking in the brain. That is the nature of the biology of psychology. With that, it's 9:50 right now. We'll return in 5 minutes at 9:55 and we'll go over this again and then move on. All right, 5 minutes, 5 minutes, only 5 minutes. See you on the other side. All right, we'll begin the session in a second. I haven't been seeing the chat, and I've been told काफी messages हैं chat में. Here is what I want you to know. Some of these things might be a little difficult in terms of, like when we speak about biology, you have to understand morality is out of question. There is no morality with biology. Biology does not care if self-harm is good or bad, or like, for instance, XYZ, ABC. Biology programs itself in a certain way. There is no doubt that endorphin release होते हैं self-harm पे. I think there was a question of that nature pehle. And you'll find when we start to discuss Freud and whatnot, that, and I'm not saying this is what I'm saying, this is what science is saying. I don't even care about it. And you'll find when we talk about Freud and whatnot too, that some of his views are extremely just controversial. And this is not what I'm saying. This is what Freud is saying, or for that matter, the psychology community is saying. So be patient. Keep an open mind. We'll get to stuff. We'll understand stuff better. All right, let's begin. So we did the simplicity to complexity chess analogy, right? Simple rules make extremely complex behaviors. You can have infinite number of chess games and never run out of new chess games. You can always have a new position with only so many rules, 8, 9, 10, whatever amount of rules. This is the idea of how complexity is formed from simplicity. The world is a complex place, but the rules of the world underneath are very simple, right? So somebody had pointed out earlier that this is how it happens in physics as well. That's absolutely accurate. We went over all these 6. We went over dopamine, we went over serotonin, we went over oxytocin, we went over endorphins, we went over adrenaline, we went over cortisol. Dopamine's motivation, serotonin's victory, oxytocin's relationship, endorphin is stress. You put your body under stress, physical labor. Adrenaline is fight, flight, freeze, danger. And cortisol is wakefulness. We went over that. And then we spoke about dopamine. And here is a video. You guys want to see this video? You guys want to understand the basics, or you guys want to move forward? Depends on that. मेरे को एक message दो, just so I get an idea. I think मेरी तो chat ही freeze हो गई है. I can't even access. There are so many unread messages. We can listen to all these individual videos, or you will get this as a downloadable, by the way. Eventually, you will get this as a downloadable on your Tag Mango thing. You can download these PPTs and go over this yourself as well. You want to see this video? Okay, we'll see this video. We'll get a good hang of this stuff. No problem. Share sound, optimize for video. You can all see this? Can you all see this? दिख रहा है? हाँ, डाउनलोड करके भी देख लेना, कोई दिक्कत नहीं है. देख लो, कोई दिक्कत नहीं है. 5 मिनट की बात है. कहीं नहीं जा रहे. इसीलिए मैंने 3 घंटे लिए हैं यार. आज आराम से चलेंगे. We are already about 50% of our way through today's lecture. सारा पर्पस ही ये है कि हम लोग बहुत ढंग से समझ सकें. देख लो दोबारा, अच्छा होगा. It'll be easier for you to register stuff.
Dopamine. People
Tell me, can you hear? Is the audio clear? ऑडियो क्लियर है यार? मेरी तो चैट ही हैंग हो गई है फुल पावर. मैं तो चैट पढ़ ही नहीं सकता.
क्लियर है
बट ठीक है, सही है. ओके भाई, जूम नहीं हैंडल कर रहा है लोड अच्छे से.
associate this hormone with pleasure and reward. Dopamine can make or break your work ethic. It can motivate you to work hard or hardly work to achieve some result. By studying rats, scientists noted a strange tendency. The animals were given a choice between 2 piles of food, a small one or a big one. The catch is that they put the big one behind a fence. And guess what? Rats with a low level of dopamine never chose to make an effort and climb the fence. At the same time, their higher dopamine-carrying counterparts stormed the fence to reach the bigger pile. Follow me, boys, over the fence! So don't forget to tip your hat to dopamine the next time you drag yourself out of bed in order to tackle the day and check all the points off your to-do list. You should also thank dopamine for that warm, fuzzy feeling of pride and reward when you complete everything you wanted to do. I'm so proud. Of course, there is a downside. A lot of illegal drugs and alcohol, as well as coffee and candy, make the body produce more dopamine. No wonder these substances are addictive. If you can't stop eating chocolate, it's not you, it's your body craving dopamine. That lets me off the hook. One more sign that you don't have enough of this hormone is slow and uncoordinated movements of your body. On the flip side, if you have too much of the chemical, you might experience too many unnecessary movements or even repetitive tics. If after learning this information, you've realized that you urgently need more of this hormone in your body, include the following dopamine-boosting foods in your diet: fish, chicken, eggs, nuts, beans, and cheese. What about the chocolate?
Right. I don't know if you noticed, but almost all of these foods that they mentioned are fats and proteins. And fats and proteins generally just tend to be, I'm not going to say better, but they tend to be like good for your body's digestion overall. Carbohydrates seem to be the enemy. We don't necessarily understand evolutionarily wo hua kya hua. But the most interesting part about that video is that rats wala study. High dopamine rats were like, hum diwar chad ke lenge jo lena hai. Low dopamine rats were like, jo easy mil raha hai le lo. And then somebody asked, if we are conscious of these hormones, will it change our lives? This is what I meant initially when I was saying, relax. Like, this is not, don't run to the conclusion of how can I help myself yet. Understand first. Conceptual understanding lo help pe hum aayenge. Right? But the idea is this: if you realize that there is a tougher, obvious goal that you need to be chasing, and you are not chasing that. Like I realized recently, bro, enough of this YouTube, enough of all of this stuff. You're getting unhealthy. You're gaining weight. You're not going working out. There's a tougher goal, which is fitness, that I'm not chasing at all. I'm just wasting my time away, being lazy, sitting in front of a screen. That is because there is a lack of dopamine to that effect. In that direction, there is no dopamine. Going to the gym, एक वो हैंसल एंड ग्रेटल की स्टोरी है ना, जिसमें वो एक ब्रेड क्रम्स छोड़ जाता है, ब्रेड क्रम्स ट्रेल कहते हैं जिसको. द ब्रेड क्रम ट्रेल टू द जिम does not have dopamine for me. That's why I'm not going to the gym. So what I need to do is I need to go there. I need to do it. I need to get that reward, and I need to code myself with dopamine in that direction. This is what you do with motivation. You start a new game. You start it at a level that's tough enough, but not too easy. If it's too easy, 100% chance पे हम देख रहे थे, 75% chance पे देख रहे थे, नीचे आ रहा था. And it's not too tough, हम 25% chance पे देख रहे थे, नीचे आ रहा था. It's not too easy, it's not too tough. It's find the perfect challenge. It takes a little bit for you to understand what the perfect challenge is. Right? Once you find the perfect challenge, attempt it, do it. See whether you pass or you fail. It will not matter. एक दो बार लगेंगी फेल होते हुए, तीसरी बार में तुम फाइनली एक पुशअप मार पाए. पर जैसे ही तुम वो पुशअप मार लोगे ना, your body is flooded with dopamine. Now you want to become the best push-up artist of all time. So add a game, introduce randomness, keep leveling up the challenge, because eventually this challenge is going to become too easy. You're going to get 100% accuracy on making 10 push-ups. Then you want कि मैं 50 push-ups करूं, वापस 50% accuracy पे आ गया. And then finally you want to do it in front of public. उससे वो सेरोटोजेनिक जो हम बात कर रहे थे ना, पब्लिक परसेप्शन वाली, वो उसके लिए है मोटिवेशन का वो वाला पार्ट. एक मैंने फॉर्मूला बहुत पहले किसी वीडियो में डाला था, ये किसी को याद हो तो यूट्यूब पे. दिस इज द एक्सपेरिमेंट वी वेंट ओवर. सामने स्टिमुलस स्क्रीन पे कुछ बचता है, मंकी दबाता है स्पेस बार अपने सामने, उसको जूस मिलता है. पहली बार जब जूस मिलता है, जूस मिलने के बाद रिवॉर्ड आता है. फिर बॉडी समझ जाती है, भाई ये बटन दबाएंगे स्क्रीन पे लाइट आने के बाद तो रिवॉर्ड मिलेगा. तो बॉडी कहती है जैसे ही स्क्रीन पे लाइट आई रिवॉर्ड दे दो, ताकि बटन दबा के तुम जूस पी लो. तुम्हारी साइकोलॉजी और तुम्हारे हार्मोन्स का काम तुम्हें जिंदा रखना है एक सेंस में. अब वो जूस खाना है, जिंदा रखने का तरीका है, तो बॉडी तुम्हें पहले ही खुशी देके बोल रही है उस डायरेक्शन में जाओ. उस खुशी, उस एक्साइटमेंट को मोटिवेशन कहते हैं. दिस इज द सेम एक्सपेरिमेंट दैट आई एक्सप्लेन्ड. You can watch this video afterward. This is from Robert Sapolsky's lectures on behavioral biology, Stanford 2010, something like that. He explains this very same experiment. And if you remember, मैंने ये course, this Sapolsky का course I'd suggested way before I'd even announced fundamentals of psychology. So if somebody's already watched this, good job, right? We saw, we missed that one image here somehow, जहाँ पे reward के बाद पहली बार ऊपर जाता है curve, but उसके बाद से this is what happens. Signal आते ही बॉडी को पता है मेरे को खुशी मिलने वाली है. It gives you happiness. It gives you dopamine rush. And it finishes by the time the work is complete also. खुशी मिल गई, काम हो गया. खुशी कह रही है काम के बाद मेरे को टिकना भी नहीं है, अब तू रिवॉर्ड रख. And this is the same thing that happens to you when you're going on trips. The same thing when you're trying to buy new stuff. Initially you're so happy, oh my God, I bought this. And then it just flatlines, you're bored. Right? इसको happiness treadmill, dopamine treadmill. There's many words for this. You can run continuously but never be happy, right? If we add variation, if we add randomness, if we add intermittent reward systems, जो gambling में बहुत जबरदस्त तरीके से यूज होते हैं, लॉटरीज में बहुत जबरदस्त तरीके से यूज होते हैं. एक बार रिवॉर्ड दे दो, पागल हो जाएगा सामने वाला आदमी. उसको लगेगा अरे कि करते रहो मिल जाएगा दोबारा, खोदते रहो मिल जाएगा दोबारा, right? This is that principle. And then this is the importance of dopamine. If you look at it, it's all motivation bound. Learning, you will learn if you're motivated to learn. Motivation to likha hai, ye mood. Your mood's going to be nice. Attention is going to be better because you're motivated. Your movement is going to be dictated. मैं कह रहा हूँ ना वो invisible breadcrumb trail to the gym. All of this, in fact, your balance, how you balance yourself and walk, dopaminergic. So it's not कि dopamine matlab happiness. Dopamine does a lot of shit for your body, a lot of stuff. To understand each and every of those, very complicated. The general mood of dopamine is motivation. एक advance में खुशी जिसके behalf पे तुम काम करोगे. Serotonin. Let's watch this video on serotonin, get a better idea.
Serotonin. This hormone is one of the happiness hormones. Surprisingly, 90% of this chemical is in your intestines and blood platelets, which means that serotonin
सुनाई दे रहा है? दिख रहा है सबको? वैभव confirm करो.
also plays an important role in digestive health. Its nickname is the feel-good hormone, and not without reason. If you sleep well, have high self-esteem, are generally in a good mood, enjoy a healthy appetite and sexual desire, or memorize everything easily, your serotonin is definitely at a good level. What's more, having enough of this hormone helps you multitask. People with serotonin imbalance or deficiency suffer from anxiety, panic attacks, depression, or even fits of anger. And if you constantly get stuck on certain thoughts that seem more important than anything else in the world, this is called obsessive behavior, and a low level of serotonin is to blame. To produce serotonin, your body needs carbohydrates, so eat more bananas and yogurt. Also, try to get more sunlight, as it helps your body produce vitamin D, which in turn helps with serotonin production. Just don't forget about the sunscreen.
Right. Right. In deep sleep, melatonin. पहले सबसे पहले melatonin release होता है. That's what puts you into sleep. And then leptin and और भी hormones. बहुत सारे hormones हैं यार. Melatonin is the sleep hormone. And melatonin and serotonin are so related. जो तुम्हारी melatonin रात की नींद के टाइम आई है ना, जब तुम सुबह रोशनी को देखते हो, वो melatonin serotonin बन जाती है. Think about that. Right? So like how well you sleep, how much melatonin you produced while you were sleeping is directly proportional to how much serotonin you will have in the day. And here is the deal. If you ever wonder कुछ लोग ऐसे क्यों हैं, तुम देख सकते हो ये society में. If you ever go to Twitter, there is two types of people you have on Twitter. People you follow because you are impressed by them, and people you follow because they are your friends. Same on Instagram, same on every other stuff. And जिन लोगों से तुम impressed हो, तुम सोचते हो यार ये इतने काम कैसे कर लेते हैं, ये 5, 7, 8 काम एक साथ कैसे कर लेते हैं, जिंदगी में इतने बड़े-बड़े गेम कैसे खेल लेते हैं, ये फोड़ कैसे रहे हैं लाइफ में. That's because they're high on serotonin. They can take bigger risks. They're already in their mind winning so well that they can afford to take bigger risks. Serotonin roughly is what allows you to climb up social hierarchy, and Jordan Peterson makes that point very consistently. It's best you hear that point from him. But the idea with serotonin is that it dictates how much confidence you have in your risk-taking ability as well. How well do you think will you fare against uncertainty? जब uncertainty आएगी तुम क्या कर पाओगे? That has a lot to do with as victory and confidence hormone. Peterson became super famous for talking about lobsters and how lobsters talk, and we'll see some bit of that in the next slide as well. But how lobsters talk and how lobsters fight and how the winner gets more serotonin. As soon as he gets more serotonin, वो थोड़ा broaden हो जाता है, उसके claws और बाहर निकल आते हैं, कहते हैं आप बुलाओ अगले बंदे को, मैं अगले बंदे को भी खाऊंगा. और जो lobster हार जाता है वो छुप जाता है, दुबक जाता है, साइड में चला जाता है. That's just serotogenic counter. Serotonin एक सेंस में तुम्हारी लाइफ की सक्सेस का काउंटर है. बट डोंट फॉरगेट वो सक्सेस एक डायमेंशन पे नहीं है, यूनिवर्सल ये सक्सेस होती है. मैंने बताया ना किस चीज के साथ कोडेड है विक्ट्री, किस चीज के साथ कोडेड है हार्मोन, किस चीज के साथ कोडेड है सक्सेस तुम्हारे दिमाग में सिंबॉलिकली. पैसे के साथ, स्टेटस के साथ, खुशी के साथ, परिवार की खुशी के साथ, कम्युनिटी की वेलबींग के साथ. वो तुम पे डिपेंड करता है. राइट? वी लिसन टू मिस्टर पीटरसन. Mr. Peterson, talk about it. Wait 1 second.
So these creatures engage in dominance disputes, and I think dominance is the right way to think about it because lobsters aren't very
you're sharing your desktop.
social, and so it really is.
Really? My bad. I do that sometimes. Sorry. हाँ, अब सही होगा.
So these creatures engage in dominance disputes, and I think dominance is the right way to think about it because lobsters aren't very empathic and they're not very social, and so it really is the toughest lobster that wins. You know, and what's so cool about the lobster is that when a lobster wins, he flexes and gets bigger, so he looks bigger because he's a winner. It's like he's advertising that, and the neurochemical system that makes him flex is serotonergic. And you think, well, who cares? What the hell does that mean? Well, tell you what it means. It's the same chemical that's affected by antidepressants in human beings. And so, like, if you're depressed, you're a defeated lobster. Like, you're like this. I'm small. I'm not, you know, things are dangerous. I don't want to fight. You give someone an antidepressant, it's like up they stretch, and then they're ready to, like, take on the world again. Well, if you give lobsters who just got defeated in a fight serotonin, then they stretch out and they'll fight again. And that's, like, we separated from those creatures on the evolutionary timescale somewhere between 350 and 600 million years ago, and the damn neurochemistry is the same. And so that's another indication of just how important hierarchies of authority are. I mean, they've been concerned.
Right. Here he starts to make a little bit of a political point. But the argument is simple. For 650 million years, this is the technology that has facilitated victory and defeat. There's serotonin. Because biology, think of biology as technology created by nature. It's one of the best ways to understand biology. We take biology for granted. Ye to hai hai. Nahi, bro. This has been, and you know, when he talks about towards the end, lobsters show this and therefore it applies to humans. This is very typical of how evolutionary psychologists think. We'll talk about this towards the very end today, how evolutionary psychologists think. We'll talk about evolution right after. Check, check, check. Can you hear me properly? Am I audible?
Yes.
Sab sahi hai na? Audible ke hisab se. Theek hai, theek hai. So what he's saying in some sense, this guy is कि ये 650 million साल से, which is almost half of the time we think life has been on Earth. This is the system that has facilitated victory and defeat. That's what he's saying, right? Importance of serotonin. You'll see. Regulating mood. What does that even? Yaar, ye chat is kind of disturbing me. And chat pe load itna hai that it's not responding. It's getting hanged. Bar hang ho raha hai wo. Ek second. Haan, maine chupa di. Anyway, serotonin. Serotonin regulates mood, happiness and anxiety. Regulates mood as an amplifier. जैसे मैं समझा रहा था ना, happiness होगी और happy कर देगा, sadness रोक लेगा. Sadness होगी और sad कर देगा, happiness को भी ceiling दे देगा. For stimulating the parts of your brain that control sleep and waking. कौन अच्छे से सोता है और जागता है? जिसको लाइफ में किसी चीज की टेंशन नहीं होती. किसको टेंशन नहीं होती लाइफ में किसी चीज की? जो बाप है, जो फोड़ रहा है लाइफ में. वो बढ़िया सोता है, बढ़िया उठता है. Serotonin plays a huge role with that. And it is also with increased libido, sexual activity. कौन बिल्कुल बेफिक्र होके sexually engage कर सकता है जिसको मरने का कोई डर नहीं? वरना evolutionarily when you think about sex, you are very vulnerable. अगर तुम जंगल में हो, इंसान भूल जाओ, तुम जानवर हो. You are engaging, you are engaged in sex. तुम्हें कोई पीछे से आके मार जाए. But कौन बिना टेंशन के सेक्स कर सकता है? इसको पता है मेरे को कोई नहीं मारेगा. मैं dominant हूं. High serotonin. It is almost like to enjoy life properly, you need high serotonin. It's almost like that. And the idea with how you increase serotonin is set up goals for yourself and achieve those goals. Create small victories for yourself, slowly make those victories bigger and bigger. Play bigger and bigger games. Make those victories bigger and bigger. एक तो हो गया गोल कर लिया, एक होता है विक्ट्री बना ली. ब्रो मैंने गोल इज लाइक, ओ आई हैड टू वर्कआउट टुडे. विक्ट्री इज लाइक मैंने 6 महीने वर्कआउट करके अपनी बॉडी चिजल कर ली. ये small victories when you add to your stuff. That entrance exam I cleared, that, I don't know, job I cracked. All of those things add to your serotogenic counter. And then eating properly and sleeping properly, etc., for sure. But that is how you slowly increase. When you say you are increased in confidence, what you're feeling is an increase in serotonin. And again, do not forget, ask yourself, what is my serotonin coded with? What is my confidence coded with? Why is it coded when a boy or a girl rejects me, I feel bad? Why is it coded with that? Why do I see that as a sense of victory? Ask yourself that. Because you do. तभी तो बुरा लगता है. You don't think of it as a misfit. अच्छा, उसको लगा कि हम फिट नहीं बैठेंगे. अच्छा वो हम दोनों बच गए. You see it as a personal rejection. मेरी loss हुई है. Why is that? You got to ask yourself those questions. Same with a company. If a company rejects you, maybe you were not fit. शुरू में कंपनी में घुसने के लिए 100 झूठ बोल देगा आदमी. Later to realize we were never fit. मैं 12 घंटे काम ही नहीं कर सकता 6 महीने नॉन स्टॉप विदाउट एनी रिकग्निशन. वो रिकग्निशन नहीं मिल रही तो सेरोटोनिन किक नहीं कर रहा है. तब जब पास किए थे इंटरव्यू, तब की सेरोटोनिन पे 6 महीने खींच गए. उसके बाद से बॉस ने ये मुड़ के भी नहीं बोला गुड जॉब. When your boss tells you good job in front of everybody, serotonin, that's a victory. Accumulate these small victories. Accumulate these small victories. And when Peterson 12 rules for life अगर किसी ने पढ़ी हो, वो कहता है set your house in order, this that. That is basically अब अपने रूम में victory establish कर, साफ कर रूम को. और वो एक पार्ट है उसकी एडवाइस का. But that is one of those things. We spoke about oxytocin. Let's watch a video on oxytocin as well.
Oxytocin. This hormone is the so-called love hormone. Yeah, baby. And your body releases it when you touch someone near and dear to you, whether it be a friend, a relative, or a lover. Oxytocin boosts your feeling of love and trust, which is why being in a relationship makes people happy. High levels of oxytocin help you effectively fight stress, increase sex drive, and even lower your blood pressure. If you feel lonely, stressed, tired, or unworthy, it may mean that your level of oxytocin is too low. People with this kind of problem tend to stay at home, avoid communication, and never have the energy to meet up with others or keep up a conversation. While it may seem peaceful, this reclusive lifestyle makes people with oxytocin deficiency unhappy. They realize something is wrong but can't quite grasp what exactly is happening to them. If you recognize your symptoms, don't worry. There are several tips to increase the level of the love hormone in your body. First of all, get a massage. What? Yes, you heard that correctly. A massage will help you kill two birds with one stone. Your muscles will relax, and such prolonged physical contact will release oxytocin into your system. Plus, anyone who's ever gotten a professional massage knows that it feels amazing. So get to it. One more thing to do is hug your friends and family members any chance you get. Touch a colleague's arm while chatting, or cuddle with your pet on the couch in the evening. Well, as long as you don't have a python as a pet. Yeah, that's right. Who knew that hugs could...
Right. Interesting, no? You know, जैसे एक, like one of the things I speak about in my AOC live streams is also like when you're trying to establish rapport with somebody, try and touch them on the side here. Start with here. It's a very like desensitized spot. But what you're doing in that moment, establishing rapport, is literally exchanging oxytocin. That's literally what you're doing. You know, when you hug people, airport pay, if you ever like left your family, you hug your family and you automatically cry. It's because all that love comes and you realize, oh, I'm going to be separated. So oxytocin push hota hai with the realization ki ye khatam hone wala hai thode time mein. And you know, the interesting part about when you feel lonely, you are low on oxytocin, like the video says, this is all breakups ever. The reason why you're not able to move on is because your body still needs that oxytocin. And what you need from that point on is move to a different happiness hormone. Be like, I'll give myself endorphins instead. If someone is an introvert, bro, we'll come to introvert extrovert tomorrow, because I think your concept of introvert extrovert is also inverted. Right? No texting right now. No texting right now. Save your questions. No texting right now. All breakups are that. All breakups are exactly that. Oxytocin being missed. और फिर वो तुम्हारे दिमाग में क्या हो रहा है उस ऑक्सीटोसिन के विड्रॉल में? विड्रॉल समझते हो ना कि नहीं मिल रहा ऑक्सीटोसिन, यादें आ रही हैं ब्रो, और वो यादें भी कलर्ड है. तुमने ब्रेकअप किया भली भांति, knowing full well how messed up the situation was, but suddenly you don't care about it. Suddenly you remember the good parts and you remember them better than they were, because your body wants oxytocin so bad it's literally fooling you into texting them or talking to them again. And then you eventually do. And then, you know, you realize, oh, this is not going to work, so you stay away. And then you eventually text them again, and you move in this loop where ऑक्सीटोसिन विड्रॉल थोड़े दिन हैंडल करा, अब मेरे से हैंडल नहीं हो रहा, दो मेरे को ऑक्सीटोसिन इंजेक्शन की तरह खुद में मार लिया. फिर वो मिल गया, मिलने के बाद रियलाइज हुआ ये ऑक्सीटोसिन मेरे को फुलफिल नहीं करता. फिर ऑक्सीटोसिन विड्रॉल, फिर इंजेक्शन की तरह खुद को मार लिया. तो वो नशा कभी छूटता ही नहीं है. अरे ऑक्सीटोसिन पे तो मैंने तुम्हें इतने एग्जांपल दिए थे. इंसान बोलने लगता है वीडियो में कुत्ते की आंख देख के कि इंसानों की आंखें लग रही हैं. सोचो किस लेवल पे हैक्ड है तुम्हारा ब्रेन की कुत्ते की आंख और इंसान की आंख में सेपरेट नहीं कर पा रहा है, बिकॉज रिएक्शन सेम है दिमाग के अंदर, ऑक्सीटोसिन जा रहा है. थिंक अबाउट दैट, हाउ ब्यूटिफुल, राइट? एंड ऑफ कोर्स सेक्सुअल अराउजल में हेल्प करेगा, रिलेशनशिप बिल्डिंग में जो भी चाहिए, चाहे वो सेक्सुअल अराउजल हो, चाहे वो रिकग्निशन हो, चाहे वो ट्रस्ट हो, चाहे वो अटैचमेंट हो, चाहे वो मदर इन्फेंट बॉन्ड हो, जो भी चाहिए. क्योंकि मदर इन्फेंट बॉन्ड, बाय द वे, बायोलॉजी में इज अ होल सेपरेट काइंड ऑफ रिलेशनशिप देन ऑल अदर रिलेशनशिप्स. बाकी सब बायोलॉजी कहता है ठीक है, ये रिलेशनशिप है, दोस्ती है, ये सोशियोलॉजी को पढ़ने दो, ये एंथ्रोपोलॉजी को पढ़ने दो. मदर इन्फेंट साइकोलॉजी भी पढ़ेगा, बायोलॉजी भी पढ़ेगा, डेवलपमेंटल साइंसेस भी पढ़ेंगी, सब पढ़ेंगे, बिकॉज वो बॉन्ड असली है, वो बॉन्ड बॉडी से बॉडी का बॉन्ड है. Right? We spoke about endorphins. Let's watch this video a little quickly so we get a good idea.
Endorphins. Now, this hormone is a natural painkiller produced by your body.
Painkiller.
It's known for its ability to deal with the pain caused both by internal and external factors. Endorphins don't get rid of pain completely, they just decrease its intensity. That's why you can often find these chemicals in pharmaceutical painkillers. Another cool thing about endorphins is that they can make you feel high absolutely legally. Nah, legally? When the pituitary gland starts pumping out endorphins, your mood improves and you become euphoric. And the more endorphins your body releases, the happier you are. That's why a lot of runners experience the so-called runner's high. When they push themselves to their physical limit, instead of feeling exhausted, they feel strong and ready to conquer the world. So, raise your cup to amazing endorphins. This hormone
You can all watch these videos later as well. That's why they're here. That's why they're downloadable. We will take a break right after we're done discussing hormones, and then we'll go on to discuss evolution. We'll take 10 minutes ka break, but I want to sort of go through this quickly enough. Importance, body's natural pain reliever. So if your body is in pain, if you put your body in pain, endorphins come and compensate. Exercise induced euphoria, states of pleasure including such emotions brought upon by laughter, love, sex, and even appetizing food, right? And this is for adrenaline. You guys can free to watch this. The idea is general, either fight. 3 ही स्ट्रैटेजी हैं डेंजर से बचने के लिए हमारी बायोलॉजी में कोडेड. या तो भाग ले, या लड़ ले, या छुप जा, हिल मत, दिख मत. तुमने देखा कुत्ता अपनी पूंछ हिलाता है. मैं कई महीनों से सोच रहा हूं कुत्ता अपना पूंछ क्यों हिलाता है. Why does a dog wag its tail? Because it's not conscious for the dog. It just happens. The dog cannot stop it. It's almost unconscious for the dog to wag his tail. The dog is saying, notice me, notice me, notice me, look at me. As soon as he sees somebody, जिसकी आंखों में देख के उसको ऑक्सीटोसिन किक मिल सकता है, वो अपने आप को नोटिस कराने के लिए पूंछ हिलानी शुरू कर देता है. Which is the opposite of freeze. Freeze is don't move at all. दिखना मत. Because our biology, let's just say, understands. For a lot of animals, vision is movement based. They notice movement more than static entities. That is our way of preserving ourselves from our predators. ताकि हम पकड़े ना जाए. That's what adrenaline does. This is the same thing that happens to you when you're talking to a cute girl or a guy and you don't know what to say next. Your brain freezes up. Or suddenly you're like, भाग जाओ यहाँ से. Or you try to macho up. You can't take the stuff they're throwing at you, teasing you. You can't take that. Girls experience this a lot from guys. They'll be teasing the guys back or pushing them back a little bit, trying to be like, don't come here. And the guy is going to suddenly uska alpha tabhi nikal aata hai, macho ban jata hai wo. But that's because the adrenaline is making them do a flight response. And what you need to do essentially, if you ever are concerned about speaking to a cute guy or a girl, is you need to tell your body by exposing it. अगर तुम्हारी बॉडी को लगता है ठंडे पानी से मैं जल जाऊंगा, the way you remove that fear is by standing under ठंडा पानी so many times, slowly exposing yourself to ठंडा पानी कि वो ठंडा पानी dangerous लगना बंद हो जाए. The same thing you need to do. You need to talk to enough cute girls or cute guys so your body is like, adrenaline की यहाँ जरूरत नहीं है. It's not a dangerous situation. It looks like it is dangerous, but it's not. Once the adrenaline is out of the equation, अब तुम normally बात कर पाओगे. उससे पहले तुम्हें क्या तो कोई advice दे क्या बोलना है. तुम्हारी body ही arms are heavy, knees are heavy, वो lose yourself वाले mode में चल रही है. Right? Importance of adrenaline enriches your blood, gets it where it's needed. Superhuman pain resistance. When I cut my hand's pretty cut. I don't know if you know, मेरी ये वाली जो finger है, I cannot close it all the way. This is sort of a dead thing. When I crashed my hand through glass and I ruptured my hand overall, I felt no pain for like 12 hours. I was like, क्या हो गया? क्यों लग रहे हैं stitches? दर्द तो हो नहीं रहा, खून ही आ रहा है. And then later when I woke up the next day, I just was dying from pain. 12 घंटे adrenaline let no pain get to me. This is what happens to you when you get into accidents or when you get into like injuries and it's not hurting then or बाद में hurt होता है वो इसलिए because adrenaline through your body, pain relieved. और ये एब्सोल्यूट मैक्सिमम स्ट्रेंथ वाला आर्ग्यूमेंट जो है ना, जिसमें देखते हैं कि एक गाड़ी बच्चे पे चढ़ने वाली थी, माँ ने हाथ से रोक दी, ओ माय गॉड, माँ के पास ही पावर कहां से आई? वी एक्सप्लेन इट विद एड्रेनलिन. वी आर नॉट श्योर एज अ साइंटिफिक कम्युनिटी if it's just adrenaline. We don't know how that happens. It's a magical phenomenon as far as science is concerned. It does not know, but it does happen. माँ इज लाइक सब फेंक दूंगी, बस उठा के साइड कर दूंगी मैं मेरे बच्चे के लिए, राइट? कॉर्टिसोल, स्ट्रेस एंड वेकफुलनेस, इट मैनेजेस. सो हियर इज अ डील. किसी के साथ ये होता है, इफ यू आर स्लीपिंग एंड यू वेक अप, तुम ऑटोमेटिकली फ्रिज खोल के कुछ खाने लगते हो, मीठा या कुछ भी कार्ब रिच. एटलीस्ट मेरे साथ होता है. लाइक व्हेन आई एम ट्राइंग टू स्लीप एंड आई कैन नॉट स्लीप, आई जस्ट हैव टू गेट अप एंड ईट सम कार्बोहाइड्रेट्स. आई एंड अप ईटिंग कार्बोहाइड्रेट्स. और लाइक मेरे को ब्लड शुगर, कुछ भी शुगर ही चाहिए होगा. जैसे कल रात को मैं उठ के काजू कतली खाया यार, फालतू में, सुबह 4 बजे. That's because cortisol's messed up in your system right now. Right? And we discussed the positive and the negative of each of these. Motivation to do good things, motivation to open Instagram. Victory, public perception. Love, violence to protect that relationship. Exercise, self-harm. And self-harm is only one way of understanding that. It's not, usko personally mat lena. Fights, threats makes nervous when you're talking to girls. This is most commonly seen in boys, by the way. Also in girls, but very common with boys. They're just so nervous talking to girls. Wakefulness and stress. We all understand that. And we sort of did the philosophical discussion. Every time you see a slide that says a philosophical discussion, this is where we are using interpretation. Abhi tak humne science discuss kiya. Is science ka interpretation kya hai? वहां पे हम एक philosophical discussion में घुसते हैं. Right? That is my opinion. That is my interpretation of science. Right? And the idea is there is 2 major points. One, your biology affects your psychology in almost every way it can. And 2, your biology does not understand the outer world. Your psychology does. So what gets coded in your psychology as things that are worth doing, as victories that are worth having, as things that are dangerous, determine what your body releases eventually. So when we begin solving a problem, the first thing we need to do is notice कि ये मेरा sense of victory किस चीज के साथ कोडेड है, क्यों कोडेड है, इसको हटाओ. मैंने अपने लिए एक ऐसा सेंस ऑफ विक्ट्री बना रखा है जो मैं अकम्प्लिश ही नहीं कर सकता. मैं खुद को कंपेयर करता हूं सपोज शाहरुख खान से. मैं 55 का भी हो जाऊंगा तो मैंने कभी अपने आप को, आई हैव नेवर लेट माई सेल्फ गेट सेरोटोनिन प्रॉपर्ली बिकॉज आई एम सो कन्विंस्ड विक्ट्री इज बीटिंग शाहरुख खान. नाउ आई डोंट फील गुड अबाउट माई सेल्फ, नाउ आई फील लेस कॉन्फिडेंट. So there's 2 steps. 1, biology affects psychology. 2, psychology may be एक interpretation की layer है that we need to examine. Then biology comes in. What is it coded with? Clear? With that, we'll take 10 minutes. We'll come to Darwin and we'll come to evolution right after this. We'll take 10 minutes of break. We'll meet at 22:37. So 10:37, 10 minutes from now. Because we still have to go like 50% of the way. And this one's going to be a little more like interesting, a little more fun, a little more interactive. And so, you know, खा लो, कुछ थोड़ा chill कर लो, पानी वानी पी लो, सांस ले लो. I hope this, जो ये हमारी strategy of going over stuff twice has kind of sort of helped you guys get acquainted with like मेरा पर्पस ये था कि ये स्लाइड्स बाद में दिखा के ना एक रजिस्ट्रेशन क्रिएट करना बंदे के दिमाग में. पहले स्टोरी समझ आ गई, पहले कंसेप्चुअल अंडरस्टैंडिंग हो गई, अब डिटेल समझ लो, अब देख लो कैसे दिखता है ये सब. राइट? आई होप दैट हेल्प्ड. We'll see each other in exactly 10 minutes and we'll begin with evolution. Do not be late because फिर हमें Q&A का टाइम नहीं मिलेगा. मेरे को वैसे ही लग रहा है Q&A का टाइम नहीं मिलना जिस हिसाब से आज जा रहे हैं. And then we'll have, कोई नहीं, बैठ लूंगा और आधा घंटा, मैं I have no problem. But go quick. खा लो, पी लो, जल्दी आ जाओ. There is somebody who I got a tweet from who's saying, I want you to know I've purchased the Intro to Psychology course. However, as it is primarily in Hindi, I'm unable to grasp anything, at least in the course purchase page. Have you not seen my content? Am I appearing in your face for the first time? Either way, we will refund you the money. You can absolutely relax about that if you're still here. That's absolutely no problem at all. You don't have to be heavily dissatisfied. I think it's very normal to expect, somebody who speaks in Hindi to speak in Hindi. And this is how I talk. अब वो हिंदी वाला कोई बोलने लगे भैया आप इंग्लिश में क्यों बोलते हो? This is how I talk. So I'm sorry that does not work for you, my friend. With all due respect, please get in touch with support@tagmango.com and they'll refund you your money. ओके थोड़ी देर हम चिल करते हैं जब तक हम स्टार्ट करेंगे whoever still here हम यहाँ बैठे बताओ कोई कंसर्न्स अभी तक कोई लॉजिस्टिकल कंसर्न्स है तो पूछ लो हम लोग Q&A विल डू पक्का आई प्रॉमिस यू दैट बट द नेक्स्ट पार्ट इज गोइंग टू बी वेरी फन how to deal with different pointing at can you increase the volume of your speaker? What do you mean by speaker? Oh my, you cannot hear me properly, huh? Is my audio low? जो भी तुम रिपीट की टेंशन मतलब तुम्हें वीडियो मिल जाएगा ना उस पर देख लेना ऑडियो इज फाइन लोग कह रहे हैं ऑडियो इज फाइन अभी तक कितने डीप मोमेंट्स हुए तुम्हारे लिए यार इतना स्ट्रेसफुल हो जाता है ना मैं चिल ही नहीं कर पा रहा मैं ढंग से मौज ही नहीं कर पा रहा the important part you need to remember from the philosophical discussion जो addition मैंने किया है neurotransmitters पे is the fact that interpretation is a heavy deal no matter where you study almost no matter where you study अगर तुम casually YouTube पे उठाने जाओगे ना they'll be like हाँ dopamine happiness serotonin victory the interpretive part nobody talks about so people are confused see the purpose here ये तुम्हें इंट्रोड्यूस करने का न्यूरोट्रांसमीटर से पर्पस ये नहीं है कि तुम्हें एब्सोल्यूट क्लैरिटी मिल जाए अगर तुम सोच रहे हो 6 घंटे 9 घंटे में तुम पूरी साइकोलॉजी पढ़ सकते हो तो यू अंडरस्टैंड दैट्स अब्सर्ड एक्सपेक्टेशन टू हैव द पर्पस इज तुम्हें अब इस डायरेक्शन में समझना सीखना आ गया है अब तुम गूगल पे भी जाके अगर सर्च करते हो ना न्यूरोट्रांसमीटर्स हार्मोन्स और तुम सारी लिस्ट पढ़नी शुरू करते हो यू नो हाउ टू थिंक अबाउट इट व्हाट आई एम टीचिंग यू हियर इज नॉट व्हाट टू थिंक इट्स हाउ टू थिंक एंड इफ यू आर नॉट केयरफुल यू विल मिस दैट समझ रहे हो ना like this is how you think about the biology of psychology that biology informs psychology but biology does not understand the outside world that interpretation is purely psychology's this is also sort of the disagreement that happened between Zizek and Peterson Zizek versus Peterson mein there is several hormones released simultaneously all the time bro right Zizek और Peterson की debate में भी ये moment था where Zizek is coming at the whole lobster point and Zizek says something like Peterson I agree I agree that there is an evolutionary similarity That I get. But on top of this, there is an entirely different level of symbolic logic. So the point is, उस symbolic logic को जिस दुनिया में हमने success को relate कर रखा है इन material चीजों से, कितना पैसा है, कितना status है, उसको fix करने को बोलो ना. वो भी तो एक important part है. सिर्फ सेरोटोनिन हाई करना सोशल हायरार्की में, सोशल हायरार्की बनी किस चीज से है? वो सिंबॉलिक लॉजिक क्या है जिससे वो बनी हुई है? सिंबॉलिक लॉजिक बाय द वे इज अ स्टडी इन फिलॉसफी, जहां हम समझते हैं सिंबल्स का क्या मतलब होता है. जैसे हम ब्रांड से एक टिक देख के नाइकी और नाइकी का पूरा कॉन्सेप्ट समझ जाते हैं ना पीछे तक, फिलिप नाइटहुड तक, राइट? ये सिंबॉलिक लॉजिक सिर्फ ह्यूमंस को अलाउड है. एब्स्ट्रैक्शन कहते हैं इसे, सिर्फ ह्यूमंस को अलाउड है, और किसी के पास नहीं है एब्स्ट्रैक्शन. So Zizek is pointing at that. He's like, वो बात तो तेरी ठीक है कि बायोलॉजी ऐसे एक्ट करती है, बट लॉबस्टर्स का सिंपल है, मारो तो मिला सेरोटोनिन, नहीं मारो तो नहीं मिला. इंसानों में there is a whole interpretive symbolic layer on top. किस चीज के साथ कोडेड है उस बारे में बात करना. He's like, उसको क्लीन करते हैं ना. That is his idea. Well, Peterson is, कोई कह रहा है Zizek और Peterson वाली बात समझ में आई कि नहीं आई? Can adrenaline be interpreted as a fear hormone as well? Not necessarily. No. We'll talk about how emotions come about tomorrow, and then you'll know. अच्छा नहीं आई. मैं Zizek और Peterson. So from what I remember, and I don't remember it properly, Peterson का argument ये है ना कि we are like animals. You know, we are like animals. और animals में क्या होता है? तुम्हें victory मिलती है तो serotonin high होता है, defeat मिलती है तो serotonin low होता है. Zizek's like, हाँ वो बात ठीक है, वो बात ठीक है, लेकिन तुम विक्ट्री और डिफीट के रूल्स तो एग्जामिन करो. वो रूल्स ही उल्टे हैं. क्योंकि इंसानों में तो वो जो रूल्स हैं वो भी चेंज हो सकते हैं. जानवरों में क्या है? जो फिजिकली जीता वो ठीक है, बड़े सींग तो बड़ा स्ट्रांग, बड़े दांत हाथी के तो बड़ा स्ट्रांग, बड़े पंजे शेर के तो बड़ा स्ट्रांग. इंसानों में ये सब नहीं होता ना. इंसानों में तो पैसा किसके पास ज्यादा है, वो पैसा खर्चने की ताकत. अच्छा मान ले मेरे पास पैसे 100 रुपए हैं पर मैं खर्चता 90 हूं, तेरे पास 200 है पर तू खर्चता 20 है. तो दुनिया को लगता है कि मैं ज्यादा डोमिनेंट हूं, तो मेरे को लगता है क्योंकि दुनिया को लगता है मैं ज्यादा डोमिनेंट हूं, और तेरे को ये मानना पड़ेगा इवन दो यू नो तू ज्यादा डोमिनेंट है, कि दुनिया को लगता है मैं ज्यादा डोमिनेंट हूं, तू मैं ज्यादा डोमिनेंट हूं. अब ये वाले गेम चल रहे हैं ना. सो Zizek से उसको एड्रेस करना. ये अंडरलाइंग रियलिटी तो ठीक है कि बायोलॉजी चला रही है, उसके ऊपर का सिंबॉलिक लॉजिक जो है, किस चीज के साथ क्या कोडेड है, उस बारे में बात करते हैं ना. समझ रहे हो? आप सबका डीप आ रहा है, कह रहे डीप हो गया भैया, हमें नहीं पता आपने डीप कैसे कर दिया. नाउ व्हेन यू हैव दिस लैंग्वेज ऑफ अंडरस्टैंडिंग दिस स्टफ, अब तुम ये सारे फैक्टॉइड समझ सकते हो, अब तुम प्रॉपर एनालिसिस कर सकते हो इन चीजों का. दिस इज नॉट वेयर योर जर्नी विद साइकोलॉजी एंड्स, क्वाइट लिटरली दिस इज वेयर योर जर्नी विद साइकोलॉजी बिगिंस. यार द प्रॉब्लम विद रिएक्टिंग टू Zizek इज नॉट दैट ही इज जस्ट टू कॉम्प्लेक्स, बट Zizek के जो रेफरेंसेस होते हैं ना, उसको देने के लिए बहुत बैकग्राउंड चाहिए. अब मैं तुम्हें क्या समझाऊं हिगेल क्या कह रहा है वहां पे, और मैं क्या समझाऊं लकान की क्या अलग हाउस. पहले मेरे को समझाना पड़ेगा फ्रॉइड क्या कहता है, देन मेरे को समझाना पड़ेगा फ्रॉइडियन स्कूल क्या कहता है, तब उसमें मेरे को बताना पड़ेगा लकान फ्रॉइड से डिफर कहां करता है. और उसके लिए हो सकता है मेरे को पहले तुम्हें समझाना पड़े साइको एनालिसिस क्या है. लकीली वील गो ओवर समवॉट ऑफ व्हाट साइको एनालिसिस इज हियर, सो यू विल हैव अ बेस. कोई कह रहा है आज से ऑर्गेज्मिक नहीं ऑक्सीटोसिनिक बोलूंगा. कैन वी टेक ऑक्सीटोसिन एक्सटर्नली, बट इट्स डेंजरस ब्रो, यू विल फॉल इन लव फॉर नो गुड रीजन. तू ले भी सकता, अगर मेरे को नहीं पता मेडिकल ग्रेड ऑक्सीटोसिन तेरे को मिल सकता है कि नहीं मार्केट पे, और तू नेजली मारेगा तो कितना अब्सॉर्ब होगा तेरे ब्रेन में. बट तू सोच, तू सड़क पे चल रहा है, तूने मार लिया, तेरे को सामने वाली चीजें पसंद आने लग गई फालतू में. इससे बढ़िया तो एक इंसान ढूंढ लो ना, जैसे नॉर्मल लोग करते हैं शादी, या बच्चे या कुत्ते, वो वाले काम कर लो ना. इज दैट नॉट मोर नॉर्मल? Anyway, we are past the point where we should begin. So come back. Is everybody back here? Are we good to go? Are we good to go? Can we fall in love with anything? Remember, oxytocin's relationship building. So your question is, can we make a relationship with anything? Yeah. Yeah, we can make a relationship. This is my favorite remote, by the way. Favorite remote. It's no different than any other remote, but this is my favorite remote. We do this all the time. My favorite shirt, my favorite car, my favorite sportsman. He doesn't even give a shit about you. Virat Kohli doesn't even know who you are. Favorite sportsman. That's oxytocin. कोई कह रहा है ganja stimulates almost everything, bro. It almost, because जो तेरे dopamine to some extent serotonin जो है ना, ये cannabinoid pathways पे काम करता है दिमाग पे, and cannabinoid pathways पे cannabis भी काम करता है. That is why it's called cannabinoid. And जो opiate pathways हैं तुम्हारे दिमाग पे, opium जिसे अफीम कहते हैं, जैसे heroin और मॉर्फिन कहते हैं ड्रग्स के मामले में, तुम्हारा एंडोर्फिन उस पर काम करता है। तो तुम अगर तुम पंजाब से हो, तुम्हें आसपास बहुत लोग मारते हैं अफीम, उनसे पूछ लो, बोलेंगे हमें दर्द नहीं होता, हम 25 घंटे भी ट्रक चला सकते हैं। वो सेम चीज है एंडोर्फिन में, मैं कितनी भी देर भाग सकता हूं, मेरे को दर्द नहीं होता। सोचो इस लेवल पे। Anyway, now we'll talk about evolution. And here is why evolution is interesting when we start to talk about psychology. You need to get this very straight. Why you need an evolutionary repertoire? Why you need an evolutionary background to think? Evolution roughly talks about the outer boundaries of what is possible and what is not possible. Boundary condition, base code of human behavior, evolution ने frame किया है। अगर हमारी एवोल्यूशनरी हिस्ट्री में आज तक ऐसी सिचुएशन नहीं हुई, सपोज एक्स सिचुएशन, उस बिहेवियर का हमारे उसमें होना बहुत मुश्किल है, उस थॉट का हमारे उसमें होना बहुत मुश्किल है। एक बहुत ही बेहतरीन सवाल है जो ट्विटर पे जो ज्ञानबाज होते हैं वो आके एक ना एक मिनट में दिखा देते हैं, व्हाई डोंट वी बिकम फ्रेंड्स विद एवरीवन, व्हाई डू दीज कंट्रीज हैव टू फाइट? एंड बच्चे फील दिस वेरी ऑफ्टन, व्हेन यू आर किड्स यू फील दिस वेरी ऑफ्टन, व्हाई इज आवर कंट्री फाइटिंग, व्हाई कैन इट नॉट बी, व्हाई कैन वी नॉट बी ब्रदर्स एंड सिस्टर्स, यू नो, ऑल रिलीजन्स, ऑल कंट्रीज, ब्रदर्स एंड सिस्टर्स. Kids have that thought particularly. Part of the reason is because kids don't conceptualize sexual relationships. Kids don't have concept of sexual relationships. So brothers and sisters is the natural, you know. But it's also related to immature thinking because you don't understand all of human evolution has been against other humans. We have always been fighting. You cannot remove that code. Well, you can deactivate it. There are certain ways in which you can deactivate it. उसकी पॉसिबिलिटी क्या है क्या नहीं वो एक सेपरेट कॉन्वर्सेशन है. कितने टाइम तक तुम डीएक्टिवेट करके रख पाओगे वायलेंस का और कंपटीशन का कोड, वो एक सेपरेट कॉन्वर्सेशन है. बट वो कोड एग्जिस्ट करता है वायलेंस के लिए भी, वो कोड एग्जिस्ट करता है इन ग्रुप आउट ग्रुपिज्म के लिए भी. स्कूल में बच्चे दिखा देते हैं ग्रुपिज्म 5वीं 6वीं क्लास में. तुम कहां उनको बताओगे जिनको करोड़ों लोगों की रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी लेनी है कि लड़ो मत किसी और से? Why can we not just be good people? Because biology does not give a shit about good. Biology has no concept of good. It does not care about your good in 2021. Biology is infinite. It has been around for 1.2 billion years. It had to accommodate everything in 1.2 billion years. Do you think it gives a shit about your feelings in 2021? I mean, well, frankly, our neurotransmitter discussions are about feelings and biology, but, you know, do you think it has time to be like, oh, you know, like, why can we not be friends with everybody? Why do we have to be violent? And these are just one or two examples. There's many such things you'll find that form the base code of human behavior, like sociability. You cannot have a human that is absolutely alone forever. I don't get it. It's very difficult. You can possibly create that, but हमारी tendency क्या है? To socialize, to talk, to express. You'll find one maybe exception अगर तुम उन साधु ऋषि मुनियों में विश्वास रखते हो, you know, जो बिल्कुल ही अकेले हिमालय में. That's separate. But eventually उनके साथ भी 2-3 लोग और होते हैं. We are programmed for company. We are programmed for society. Much like competitions built into us, cooperations built into us. Same way hunger is built into us. Same way desire to survive is built into us. Same way desire to reproduce is built into us. And the reason for that is, much like our body, intelligence तो हमें अभी आई है कि हम अपने आप को सब चीजों से सेपरेट करके ओ यूनिवर्स ये है, लाइफ ये है कर सके. वो इंटेलिजेंस तो अभी आई है हमारे पास जहां हम एब्स्ट्रैक्शन में बात कर सके, सिंबल्स में बात कर सके, आइडियाज के बारे में बात कर सके. उससे पहले तो क्या है, अपनी जान बचाओ, इसीलिए इंटेलिजेंस काम आती थी. इंटेलिजेंस वाज वर्थ सर्वाइवल, नो, बिफोर. Until humans, all intelligence is worth survival. Survival does not care. Survival cares to survive. The whole point about evolution and why you need to understand evolution is it gives you a psychological base code, boundary conditions in psychology. 1. 2. It gives you what is called a predisposition, tendency, habit. कि अगर मैं उसको टच ना करूं बाय डिफॉल्ट किस डायरेक्शन में चीज जाती है. तो अगर मैं बोलूं ना भाई सुनो सेक्स पे खुद को रिस्ट्रेंट करो, तो चीज कहां जाती है? सेक्सुअल. फिर आदमी खुला सेक्स करता है. अनलेस रिस्ट्रेंट इज ब्रॉट अपॉन हिम, डिजायर सेक्स करने की है, प्लेजर लेने की है. Well, part of the reason why orgasms are pleasurable is because biology wants you to have sex. It's like हम तेरे को सबसे अच्छी खुशी देंगे. तेरे कैनाबिनॉइड और तेरे ओपिएट सिस्टम दोनों फट रहे होंगे, तेरे दिमाग में इतने हार्मोन होंगे उस टाइम. We'll give you an orgasm, biology said. Just have sex and reproduce, please. So biology is fooling us by giving us happiness to have sex. But the idea is, it's like तुम कंट्रोल पैनल में गए अपने कंप्यूटर के, तुमने देखा क्या सेटिंग्स हैं जो मैं चेंज कर भी सकता हूं, बाउंड्री कंडीशंस, और उनके डिफॉल्ट सेटिंग्स क्या है. दैट इज व्हाट एवोल्यूशन गिव्स. एंड एवोल्यूशन इज अ फैंटास्टिक स्टोरी. Because before evolution happened, and this is somewhere mid-80s, 1850s, this is where around the time Darwin's about to come in the scene and declare evolution. But usse pehle tak there was essentially a creationist argument happening कि भाई देखो भगवान ने बनाया सब भगवान का किया गया है, सब भगवान ने बनाया. और भगवान ने बनाया है तो देखो इस ऑर्डर में बनाया भगवान ने. सबसे ऊपर तो भगवान ही है, उसके बाद एंजल्स हैं जो हमेशा सब कुछ अच्छा करते हैं, उसके बाद डीमंस हैं जो पावरफुल है बट हमेशा सब कुछ गलत करते हैं, फिर ह्यूमंस हैं. और ह्यूमंस में भी अगर तुम देखोगे, ऑल रिलीजन टॉक अबाउट गुड पीपल एंड बैड पीपल फॉर द सेक ऑफ सिंप्लिसिटी, एज इफ वहां पे भी कोई डिवाइड है. आई लाइक अलेक्जेंडर सोल्जनित्सिन जो कहता है वो डिवाइड बिटवीन गुड पीपल एंड बैड पीपल राइट थ्रू योर हार्ट, नॉट बिटवीन पीपल, नॉट बिटवीन कंट्रीज, नॉट बिटवीन रिलीजन्स एंड एथनिसिटीज, राइट थ्रू योर हार्ट. You are both good and bad. It depends on what you let out, which also is a part of stuff we'll cover today or day after. We'll cover day after, personality mein. Right. So we were talking about, they created this great chain of being, Christians primarily. In the Renaissance, in the 1500s, the Christians were like, हमने इसको order दे दिया. God, angels, demons, and humans, animals, plants, minerals, and rocks. This is the great chain of being. This is what the world accepted. The world's like, हाँ यही हुआ है. This is how it is. और इसमें भी इनफैक्ट जो ग्रेट चेन ऑफ बीइंग है, इसमें और भी वेरिएशन थे. ह्यूमंस में प्रीस्ट सबसे ऊपर हैं, उसके नीचे रेगुलर नोबल्स हैं, उसके नीचे रेगुलर ह्यूमंस हैं, फिर स्लेव्स हैं. Classic notion of hierarchy in religion. We've seen this with our religions. We see it with Hinduism. Casteism used to be a thing. Somewhat similar. This need for organizing life. This was the preconception of how life came to be on earth. ये idea था लोगों का, life ऐसे आई है. And then Darwin, a young boy in England, I think his father wanted him to be a doctor or some shit. A lot of you might relate to his story. He's like, Papa, listen, I'm going to go on this vacation. I'm going to come back और उसके बाद देखेंगे. And he goes on this vacation. This long vacation Darwin goes on. From the UK, which is on, the western coast of Europe. The western side of Europe. He crosses the Atlantic, नीचे आता है, crosses the Atlantic into the Pacific, and he's on the western side of South America. He's in the Pacific, on the western side of South America. और वहां पे एक्वाडोर करके एक कंट्री है. Who's heard of Ecuador? और एक्वाडोर के पास एक आइलैंड ग्रुप है, Galapagos. Galapagos is still very famous. People can go there for vacations. When you go to Ecuador, they have a tour for Galapagos. और Galapagos is so famous because वहां पे आज भी ज्यादा लोग नहीं रहते. और लोग नहीं रहते ना, तो वाइल्ड लाइफ has grown very differently. वहां पे जो insects और animals और birds available हैं वो बहुत अलग हैं. You have tortoise thrice as big as tortoise normally in Galapagos. I had friends post pictures of those tortoise. They're huge. ऐसा लगता है भाई क्या हो गया अब normal tortoise, ये teenage mutant ninja turtle यहाँ क्या कर रहा है? Right, like that kind of stuff. So he went to Galapagos on this ship SS Beagle. He's written a very famous book. This is the book Darwin writes, The Voyage of the Beagle. I picked it up for $2 sometime. कहीं बाहर सड़क पे बिक रही थी ये किताब. And what happens is when he's on those Galapagos islands, वो एक island पे जाता है, and he finds a common bird in all those islands. It's a very common bird. You find it everywhere. The bird's called a finch. And with those finches, what he finds interestingly is that each of those finch is slightly different from the others. हर आइलैंड पे उसी फिंच के अलग अलग वर्जन चल रहे हैं. He's like, ये क्या हो रहा है? What is this? Why is this happening? So he starts to observe those finches. He finds जिस आइलैंड पे फिंच की बीक लंबी है ना, वहां पे वो फिंच क्या खाती है? ट्री बार्क में अपनी बीक डालती है, इंसेक्ट निकालती है. मिट्टी में अपनी बीक डालती है, इंसेक्ट निकालती है. जिस आइलैंड पे उस फिंच की जो वो है बीक है, वो छोटी है, लाइक अ पैरेट शेप्ड बीक, थोड़ी सी. आई विल शो यू द इमेजेस आफ्टर. वहां पे वो सीड्स खाते हैं. उनको वो छोटी बीक चाहिए ताकि वो क्रश कर सकें सीड्स को डाइजेस्ट करने से पहले. And he found all these variations to make sense in some way. They were like, अरे ये वेरिएशन इसलिए है क्योंकि environment की नीड है. And Darwin has this insane moment where he figures out one of the most interesting moments in all of scientific history. He figures out natural selection. He's like, oh my God, so this is what is happening. All these birds probably had a common parent. But all these birds got around to these different islands, और इन islands पे survive करने की need अलग-अलग थी. और क्योंकि इन islands पे survive करने की need अलग-अलग थी, सिर्फ जो birds इन islands पे survive कर सकती थी वो बच गई, बाकी मर गई. He's thinking, but ऐसा हुआ कैसे कि इन birds के पास के special powers आई? And he's like, okay, I get it. I get the idea. The idea is, एक मेल बर्ड और एक फीमेल बर्ड सेक्स करते हैं. उनके कई बच्चे होते हैं. हर बच्चे में थोड़ा थोड़ा चेंज होता है. और उन सब चेंज्ड नई जनरेशन में से जो भी इन्वायरमेंट में सबसे फिट बैठती है वो जिंदा रह जाती है, बाकी मर जाते हैं. अब सपोज एक छोटी बीक वाली बर्ड इंसेक्ट वाले आइलैंड पे पहुंच गई. वो छोटी बीक वाली बर्ड एक छोटी बीक वाली बर्ड के साथ मेट करती है. उनमें से एक बच्चे की बीक थोड़ी बड़ी है, बाकी सबकी छोटी है. अब जब खाने खिलाने ढूंढने की बात आई इंसेक्ट्स, क्योंकि उस एरिया में इंसेक्ट्स अवेलेबल हैं, तो जो थोड़ी सी लंबी बीक वाली है वो सरवाइव कर गई. जो बाकी है वो भूखे मर गए. उनके जीन्स पास ऑन नहीं हुए अगली जनरेशन में. अब इस लंबी बीक वाली ने किसी और बर्ड के साथ हैंकी पैंकी किया. उस हैंकी पैंकी में अब जितने बच्चे हुए पैदा, वो इस बेस से चालू हुए लंबी बीक. धीमे धीमे करके बीक्स जो हैं परफेक्ट होती चली गई इस प्रोसेस में, ओवर जनरेशंस ऑफ मल्टीपल ट्रायल एंड एरर. दिस इज द इंटेलिजेंस ऑफ नेचर. नेचर डज नॉट नो हाउ टू सॉल्व अ प्रॉब्लम. नेचर इज नॉट अलाइव. नेचर इज एन एल्गोरिथम. This whole idea, I saw this tweet also, nature, universe, God, alive, life, this, that bullshit. Nature is not alive. Nature has no intention. Nature does not know how to solve a problem. Nature is just like, I'll try everything and something will work. But I'll try everything from what is available. जो है उसी का कुछ बना सकती है nature. जैसे, we'll give this example later on, wings initially were not made to fly. Wings were to keep you warm. But then nature's like, oh my God, अब तो इतनी सर्दी है नहीं बाहर. And these big birds who are keeping themselves warm, they don't need that warmth anymore. And they're being eaten alive जमीन पे. तो धीमे धीमे नेचर ने क्या बोला? इनको हल्का करते जाओ, हल्का करते जाओ, हल्का करते जाओ. And those wings became flying objects after that. Initially, the wings were there to just keep you warm. That's just one example. And it's a specific example. We'll discuss more examples. But this is the logic of natural selection. Environment में एक pressure है survival के लिए. Environment कहता है survive करना है. Body बोलती है, during the process of reproduction over and over, slight changes in every generation. And some of those changes fit the new puzzle of the environment. And those changes get encouraged and amplified over many generations. And through millions and billions and like an infinite amount of repetition later, we have this just charm of life forms, this insane amount of variation in life forms. This is the genius of Darwin. Darwin single-handedly destroyed the notion that God created life. He figured out what is the algorithm that created life, and he called it natural selection. He's like nature in an uncaring way, without knowing what it's doing, is creating all this different life. But there was another man around the same time. And this guy was working in Malaysia with plants. His name was Alfred Russel Wallace. And Wallace was coming up, uska bhi na, research with plants was coming to the same conclusion. He heard somehow कि भाई एक बंदा है डार्विन इंग्लैंड में, उसने फिगर आउट कर लिया. So he's like, अरे मैंने भी फिगर आउट कर लिया. He calls up Darwin, he writes a letter. He's like, Darwin सुन, मेरे को भी वही आइडिया है प्लांट्स देख के जो तेरे को आया जानवर देख के. Darwin's like, क्या बात कर रहा है, कमाल है, मैं तेरे को रिप्लाई करता हूँ. And then Darwin disappears for a few days. And this is a very controversial disappearance because they're like he was trying to steal Wallace's idea. We always like that ना कि एडिसन बेकार है, टेस्ला महान है. Like वो जो थोड़ा सा भी mystical character होता है उसके पीछे underdog support लग जाता है जाके. Right? Black sheep support. Same चीज. People are like Darwin को चोरी गपला कर रहा था. But Darwin's not, he's not selfish. He calls up Wallace after he's done. Calls up मतलब writes a letter. Sorry, we live in 2021. He writes a letter to Darwin. He's like, to Wallace. He's like, सुन ऐसा कर, come to England. We will declare our findings. And उस टाइम एक बहुत famous scientific society है, Royal Linnean Society. They go to the Royal Linnean Society and they announce the theory of natural selection. And the world goes berserk. People just lose it. There is 3 people. There is Copernicus, there is Darwin, and there is Freud that people just did not like. We'll discuss 2 out of those 3 because all 3 of them said God is not at the center of this earth or of this universe, and we are not at the center of this universe, and nobody gives a shit about us. We are just random, just like animals are. Darwin essentially said this to a religious person. Darwin की कहानी क्या है? हम भी बंदर हैं. और वो रिलीजियस आदमी डाइजेस्ट कैसे करे? उसके लिए दिमाग में तो स्ट्रिक्टली हम जानवरों से ऊपर हैं. अरे ग्रेट चेन ऑफ बीइंग है, राइट? एंड दिस इंटायर शोर शराबा हैपेंस. ये दोनों बंदे शोर शराबा झेलते हैं. उसके बाद सब शांत हो जाते हैं. लोग एक्सेप्ट कर लेते हैं नेचुरल सिलेक्शन एज द मेन स्ट्रीम थ्योरी ऑफ लाइफ. बट वन डे Wallace just wakes up and he cannot go to sleep. Wallace like, डार्विन हमने गलती कर दी है ब्रो. डार्विन लाइक, क्या बोल रहा है भाई? हम यहां तक आ गए, सबसे लड़ लिए, पूरी साइंटिफिक हिस्ट्री फॉरएवर चेंज कर ली, अब तेरे को क्या गलत लग रहा है? Wallace लाइक, ब्रो कुछ गड़बड़ है ब्रो. There is something that is wrong. And then Darwin's like, बता तो क्या गलत है? Darwin's like, भाई क्या हो गया? लास्ट मिनट क्यों मुकर रहा है? Wallace is like, ब्रो अगर हम थ्योरी ऑफ नेचुरल सिलेक्शन को लेके चलें सीरियसली, कि हर जनरेशन में थोड़े थोड़े चेंजेस होते हैं और वो थोड़े थोड़े चेंजेस एक सर्वाइवल बेनिफिट देते हैं, और जो सर्वाइव कर गया उसके जीन्स बच जाते हैं, तो हम ह्यूमंस को एक्सप्लेन नहीं कर पाएंगे. डार्विन्स लाइक, कैसे? He's like, भाई जो सबसे समझदार जानवर भी है और जो सबसे बेवकूफ इंसान भी है, उनमें इंटेलिजेंस में इतना डिफरेंस क्यों है? क्योंकि वहां पे तो मिनिमम चेंजेस से ही बात बन जानी थी ना. जब हमारे कॉमन पेरेंट्स थे बंदरों और हमारे, तो वो बच्चा उन पेरेंट्स का जो स्लाइटली स्मार्टर है, वो आउट सर्वाइव कर जाता. इतनी स्मार्टनेस की क्या जरूरत है नेचर को हमसे? नेचर ओनली आस्क्स फॉर इंक्रीमेंटल चेंज, only gradual change. Why is the difference so stark? Why do we have language? Why do we have music? Why do we have art? Why do we have culture? Why do we have civilization? What is this building and science and technology? What is happening? And frankly, Darwin had no answer to that question. Darwin just decided to, like, you know what, we'll just play with natural selection. And Wallace basically got removed from history books since. Nobody cared about Wallace after that. Wallace pulled out. Wallace was like, I don't know, natural selection does not make sense. Well, fact of the matter is, natural selection does not answer a lot of questions about the evolution of life. It answers a lot of them, well, a huge majority of them, and it's scary how one theory can explain so much. But there is parts about the evolution of life that natural selection cannot offer. One of those is, well, how did we go from single cellular organisms to multicellular organisms? How did we go from organisms that were reproducing by just dividing to organisms that were reproducing through this mixing matching process of having sex? How did life even come about? Wahan pe kya natural selection be? These are known as, there is something called the 6 great leaps in evolution that we don't understand. They can't be explained with natural selection. And since Darwin, even during the time of Darwin and since Darwin, we have come up with more models of understanding evolution. But those models to me still don't clear the mystery on how is it that humans, so unique, how did we get formed? One of the models is called sexual selection. And sexual selection is very, very similar to natural selection. Evolution is concerned with 2 things. एक तो तुम जिंदा रहो, और जिंदा रहो तो अपने जीन्स पास ऑन करो. एक प्रेशर तो नेचर का इस लेवल पे है कि भाई जिंदा रहोगे कि नहीं रहोगे, तभी तो सेक्स कर पाओगे और रिप्रोड्यूस कर पाओगे. और जिंदा रह के करोगे क्या? सेक्स. अब अगर तुम्हें सामने वाला सेक्स भाव नहीं दे रहा है, and you don't get to pass your genes on, that's it, end of story. तुम्हारी लाइन खत्म. Your genes end there. In fact, there is a study, I don't remember, I just remembered this study as a matter of fact, that it's very common, this is pretty much like your regular Joe Rogan type study that he mentions. If you look at our DNA, we've had twice as many female ancestors as male ancestors, which means 50% of the men never, or 50% or more of the men in our history never got to reproduce. उनको मिला ही नहीं access, उनके genes खत्म हो गए. अब तो हम marriage और एक तरीके से, everybody sort of gets to reproduce, sort of, kind of, in a way, not like everybody, but yeah. पहले 50% आधे लोगों को नहीं मिलता था, लड़कों को particularly. औरतों को कैसे नहीं मिलेगा? They are the ultimate spot of reproduction, no? They carry the baby. So, अगर वो, if like females are not, तो वो तो वहीं खत्म हो गया. Female did not get to reproduce. But what that means is a small number of men were having sex with a large number of women. In our ancient times, मैं civilizational times की बात नहीं कर रहा हूँ. Ancient, जब pre-civilization, जब हम जानवर थे, जब हम होमो इरेक्टस थे, बिफोर वी वर लाइक civilized. So sexual selection is one of those things too. And the way sexual selection works is that both the male and the female of an animal, let's not consider humans right now, have requirements from the other sex when they begin to mate together. Sex for humans is enjoying, for other animals is also enjoying, but the primary purpose of sex for other animals is reproduction. हमारे पास तो birth control है, हमारे पास तो और methods हैं जिससे बच्चे ना हो, but primarily sex is reproduction. As far as psychology is concerned, sex is reproduction. So men and women, males and females, the two sexes have requirements from each other. Those requirements differ from animal to animal. But generally, from the male, the requirement that the female has is, listen, you need to be strong enough to protect our kids. Well, the male has to be strong enough to, first win the female. अगर कोई और male आए और बोले मैं तेरे को मार डालूंगा, like chimps. Chimps are unforgiving. If a stronger male comes, he's just going to beat the other male black and blue. वहां कोई प्यार का तो कॉन्सेप्ट ऐसा होता नहीं है. जरूरी नहीं है पेयर बॉन्डिंग स्पीशी हो कि उसमें हाँ प्यार का कॉन्सेप्ट हो. तू मर जा, तेरे को मार दूंगा, I will take the female. So men automatically in a lot of species become stronger. In a lot of species, not all. Like for instance, peacocks. Peacocks have those great, beautiful tails in the back of their ass, particularly. Why would there be such an animal? कौन सा एनिमल होता है जिसके चमकीले ब्लू कलर के पंख होते हैं बे? चमकीले ब्लू एंड चमकीला ग्रीन. लाइक तुम सोचो, पीकॉक तो ऐसा भी नहीं है कि कोई प्रेडेटर है कि भाई मैं मार के खाऊंगा. तुम तो प्रे हो भाई. तुम्हें तो लोग ढूंढ के मार के खाते हैं. तुम क्यों दिखावा कर रहे हो इतनी रंग बिरंगी टेल के साथ? तुम्हारे लिए तो नुकसान है, पकड़े जाओगे. But that is exactly what the male peacock is trying to say to the female peahen. And peahens are not that colorful. Here's what the peacock is saying. देख, मैं इतना कलरफुल हूं तो भी जिंदा हूं. कोई नहीं मार पाया, तेरे बच्चे का ध्यान में रख लूंगा. मेरे में स्ट्रॉन्ग जीन्स हैं, तेरे बच्चे को स्ट्रॉन्ग जीन्स चाहिए. In the same sense, men are kind of, the males, they're kind of looking for good genes, good health in the female as well, कि मेरे बच्चे का ध्यान रखना है भैया. So sexual selection is about testing the other sex on some criteria. The other sex complies. या तो वो behavioral compliance होगा कि हाँ हम गाना गाएंगे, तुम चाहती हो हम गाना गाएं, हम गाना गाएंगे, चांद तारे तोड़ लाएंगे, like in a joking way. या दूसरा एक phenotypical होता है बॉडी का एक्सप्रेशन. जैसे मेरी 5 उंगलियां, फिनोटाइप है 5 उंगली. मेरे बाल काले हैं, फिनोटाइप है. बॉडी का एक्सप्रेशन. पंख उसके क्या कहते हैं, मोर के पंख, फिनोटिपिकल. एक इस लेवल पे अडेप्टेशन होता है टू अडेप्ट टू द रिक्वायरमेंट ऑफ द सेक्स ऑफ द ऑपोजिट सेक्स. And then you get selected, you get to have babies. Those babies those genes get passed on. So imagine, I'm just giving you this imagination. Don't take this literally. I'm just teaching you how to think about it. Imagine the first human that was capable of jokes. First man that was capable of jokes, or capable of being funny. Imagine how weird that would have been. इससे पहले तक कोई नहीं हंसा है, सब अपना काम करते हैं, गुर्राते हैं, हमें ये करना है, हमें वो करना है. फिर एक आदमी आता है, वो जोक क्रैक करता है. And the ladies laugh. They love it. They can't stop laughing. And that guy just populates with all those ladies, and all the kids that are born now are funny. And suddenly we have the funny gene going between us. This is a very simplistic way. It's not accurate, but extremely simplistic way of understanding evolution and evolutionary psychology. And the reason why, the evolutionary psychology reason why we evolved humor is to signal intelligence. Humor signals how intelligent you are. So it's like, without me saying I'm very intelligent, humor signals I'm intelligent. And in the same way, buying a Lamborghini is like having those, punk. देख, मैं इतने पैसे खर्च सकता हूं और फिर भी बाप जिंदगी जी सकता हूं. It's called a Zahavian signal in evolutionary psychology. कि देख, it is very similar to suppose मैं और वैभव लड़ने लगे और मैं अपना हाथ बांध लूं पीछे, मैं बोलूं आ वैभव लड़के दिखा. किसी बाहर से पूछोगे तुम्हें क्या लगता है कौन स्ट्रांग है, सब लोग बोलेंगे प्रखर स्ट्रांग है. क्यों? क्योंकि मैंने देखा, देख मैं हैंडीकैप कर रहा हूं खुद को, मैं इतना चमकीला हूं, मेरे को पकड़ सकता है प्रे, तो भी नहीं पकड़ पाया. प्रेडिटर तो भी नहीं पकड़ पाया, इतना स्ट्रांग हूं मैं एक हाथ पीछे बांध रहा हूं, मैं 2 करोड़ रुपए लंबोर्गिनी पे खर्च रहा हूं, तो भी देखो क्या ठाट की जिंदगी जीते हैं. That is sort of the idea as far as evolutionary psychology is concerned. So there is a sexual pressure from the opposite sex. You change your behavior or slowly through variation, change how your body expresses itself. And then there is adaptation. वो encourage होता चला जाता है. The third is genetic drift. And genetic drift is बाढ़ आ गई, ठीक है, आधे बंदर उस तरफ रह गए, आधे बंदर इस तरफ रह गए, बीच में नदी कट गई. अब वो आपस में मेट नहीं कर रहे. उधर सर्दी है, इधर गर्मी है. इन्वायरमेंटल कंडीशन डिफरेंट हो गई. वो एक अलग डायरेक्शन में बंदर निकल गए, हम एक अलग डायरेक्शन में बंदर निकल गए. सिंपल आइसोलेशन. चूहे हैं, कुछ काले हैं, कुछ गोरे हैं. गोरे चूहे दिख जाते हैं, काले चूहे छुपे रहते हैं. एक बिल्ली आई, बिल्ली सारे गोरे चूहे खा गई. अब काले चूहे ही काले चूहे हैं. आइसोलेशन. जेनेटिक ड्रिफ्ट इज आइसोलेशन. एंड देन देयर इज मिक्सिंग, जीन फ्लो. कि भाई जो ये एक हाइपोथेसिस है ना कि निएंडरथल्स और होमो इरेक्टस, ये दो हमारे पेरेंट्स थे, दे वर मेटिंग टुगेदर एंड दैट्स व्हाट मेड होमो सेपियंस. कि भाई जैसे दो कुत्तों की ब्रीड आपस में मेट कर ली, एक नई कुत्ते की ब्रीड निकल आई. That is the kind of argument. These are the other three arguments we came up with as scientists to explain what causes evolution. But here's the funny part. It still does not explain Wallace's question. At least to me, scientists still वो ऐसे ही theorize करते हैं कि हमें art इसलिए आई क्योंकि औरतों और मर्दों को एक दूसरे से जरूरत थी कोई sexual way में. कुछ लोग उसे natural selection से भी explain करते हैं, कुछ लोग किसी और तरीके से भी explain करते हैं, but there is no solid explanation. As far as Wallace's question is concerned, it's one of the bigger mysteries as far as evolutionary psychology is concerned. But the idea is simple. For sex and survival, a lot of our behavior changes. A lot of our behavior changes to accommodate sex and survival. Right? And with that, let me see if I have a bunch of experiments planned somewhere to show you how that happens. Right. Yes. Okay, this is going to be the fun part. Been looking forward to this for a while. Let me just switch this on. These are studies in human evolutionary psychology. Well, psychology is essentially a humans का ही देखते हैं उसमें हम. जानवरों की psychology तो कोई खास होती नहीं life में. But these are sexual studies in evolution. Right? These are studies in and around sexual choices that show rather कि evolutionary psychology कितनी valid है, कितनी valid नहीं है. So the first thing you need to understand when it comes to talking about sex within evolution is that there is an inherent difference between men and women. Men have infinite sperm. They can have infinite babies. They have no gestation period. Women have limited eggs. Women have to carry the child for 9 months. Which means they can have only one baby in a year. That is an inherent difference between men and women. So their sexual choices will be different. Notice evolutionary psychology वाले सोचते कैसे हैं. अच्छा ये context है इस बंदे का, इनकी choices अलग होंगी. बंदे they'll be more happy having sex wherever. उनको क्या है, उनको कोई cost थोड़ी है sex की. Sex करो, impregnate करो, आगे बढ़ो. जानवरों के सेंस में सोचो. Females, they have to be careful हम किसको घर ला रहे हैं यार. They don't want to carry the baby of somebody they don't know. Human females में और भी concern होते हैं safety के. बहुत सारे concerns होते हैं और. But एक biological level पे. Biological level. On a biological level, try and understand that. On a level where you're an animal, try and understand that. So the first study has to do with choosiness. Right? And here's the experiment. Simple as experiment. Very simple. Attractive men and women were asked to approach strangers of opposite sex. एक अट्रैक्टिव आदमी को बोला उस सुंदर औरत से बात करो, सुंदर औरत को बोला उस अट्रैक्टिव आदमी से बात करो, और आफ्टर अ ब्रीफ कॉन्वर्सेशन उनसे इन तीनों में से एक सवाल पूछना है तुम्हें कि तुम मेरे साथ घर चलोगी. पहले तो तुम मेरे साथ डेट पे जाओगी या डेट पे जाओगे, तुम मेरे साथ घर चलोगी या घर चलोगे, तुम मेरे साथ बिस्तर में चलोगी या बिस्तर में चलोगे. एंड दे वांटेड टू सी मेन एंड वुमेन डू दे रिस्पॉन्ड डिफरेंटली. एंड हियर आर द रिजल्ट्स. एज फार एज द डेट वाज कंसर्न्ड, 50% of the men were like, हाँ, she's attractive, I'll go on a date. And 50% of the women were like, हाँ, he's attractive, I'll go on a date. But as soon as things begin to move slightly towards sex, more men are interested. कह रहे हैं हमें डेट पे नहीं झेलना उसे, अपार्टमेंट ले चलो. 69% of the men are like, अपार्टमेंट ले चलो. But look at how many women refuse. It's almost like 90% of the original women who agreed to go on a date उसमें से भी 5-6% बच रही हैं जो कह रही हैं, you know what, we'll go to the apartment. When it's about sex directly, will you go to bed with me? 75% of the men were like, yeah. Like, this is half the number of men more than who said no initially. 50% लोगों ने पहले ना भी तो बोला था ना, उनमें से 25% लोग मान गए कि छोड़ो डेट, छोड़ो अपार्टमेंट. भाई समझ रहे हो ना? But no woman agreed on one meeting. She's like, no, not happening. The inherent hypothesis being, for women, sex is more costly. For men, sex is cheap. Absolutely evident in this study. The evolutionary rationale behind why men are less choosy when it comes to sex and women are more choosy when it comes to sex is that for women, the cost is more. Way more than men. Here is another interesting one, okay? Okay, so the question, Buss, by the way, David M. Buss, one of the fathers of evolutionary psychology. Buss asked men and women to rate how likely were they to consent to sexual intercourse with someone they viewed as desirable. तो basically, कई सारे लोगों के रूम में भरा, उनसे पूछा, भाई सुनो, ये जो तुम्हें लड़का लड़की पसंद है, जो भी, उनके साथ सेक्स करोगे, क्या लाइक्लीहुड है? +3 हाँ, -3 बिल्कुल ना. और इसमें मैनिपुलेशन क्या है? कितने टाइम से तुम इनको जानते हो? तुम उन्हें 1 दिन से जानते हो, 1 घंटे से जानते हो, 5 दिन से जानते हो, 2 साल से जानते हो. एंड दे वांटेड टू सी क्या होता है. लेट मी जस्ट शेयर स्क्रीन सो यू कैन सी दिस प्रॉपर्ली. राइट, होल्ड अप. अरे, chat thing is not responding. Anyway, so here is what you see on the screen. The dotted line is the male line. The straight line is the female line. Right? Niche on x-axis is number of years or time known. 1 hour, 1 evening, 1 day, 1 week, 1 month, 3 months, 6 months. और यहाँ पे likelihood है. 3 being definitely yes, -3 being definitely no. Right? Now notice around the 1 hour mark. Around the 1 hour mark, women are like, definitely no. No matter how desirable the guy is, definitely no. One evening mark पे भी देखो, almost definitely no. 1 day mark पे भी almost definitely no. Females begin to get comfortable sometime around the first week. And then, it keeps moving into the month. उसके बाद up and up है. On the other hand, men from the 1 hour mark are near a -1 rating, which is like kind of no. ऐसा नहीं है कि बंदे चूजी नहीं है कि कुछ भी दे दो हो जाएगा. They're also choosy, but way less choosy. क्योंकि उनके लिए सेक्स कॉस्टली नहीं है. एक इवनिंग तक आते आते guy is more comfortable. He's closer to 0 than -1. एक दिन तक आते आते the guy is way more comfortable. And notice after the 1 week mark, ये दोनों लाइनें almost parallel हैं 1 साल तक. They're almost parallel. Right? It's almost as if it's increasing at the same rate. Around the 1 year period, you see them start to come closer. Around the 5 year period, it's almost the same. Also, before somebody gets riled up about this, listen, जब हम statistics की बात करते हैं ना, हम individuals की बात नहीं कर रहे होते, हम collective actions की बात करते हैं. तो हाँ, individual differences हमेशा रहेंगे. अगर किसी ने मैथमेटिक्स पढ़ी है और उसे एक फंक्शन का ग्राफ दिया जाए, उस ग्राफ में सिर्फ एक पॉइंट दिया जाए और ग्राफ को हटा दिया जाए, तो उस पॉइंट से तुम ग्राफ प्रिडिक्ट नहीं कर सकते. और अगर सिर्फ एक ग्राफ दिया जाए, बोला जाए एक पॉइंट प्रिडिक्ट कर दो, तो उस ग्राफ से तुम पॉइंट प्रिडिक्ट नहीं कर सकते. इंडिविजुअल और स्टैटिस्टिक्स का रिलेशनशिप 1:1 का नहीं होता है. So Saksham is asking, why is it costing more in women? Because women have to carry the consequence of sex within them. Right? The idea, okay, I'll explain this graph again because this is very interesting to understand. Women are excessively choosy about their sexual choices. Aryanabha is asking a very interesting question. Why is the male graph going down after 1 year mark? Who's to know? I don't know. There is probably no good explanation. Probably this is about the time where men decide, उन्होंने decide कर लिया कि अब with this girl, whoever it is, and she's attractive, I don't want to mess up my friendship, my relationship with this person. I'd rather not engage in a sexual relationship with them. Maybe that's my best guess, but we don't know for sure. And if you also notice, the difference is very little. Like at 1 year mark, it's probably 2.2. At the 5 year mark, it's 2, which is a lot of yes. If the difference is very little, it's very little. Nobody has a 3-point mark. Nobody's always just sitting like, haha, except like when you are desperate. In general, people are not desperate and they are fairly reasonable with their sexual choices. But by default, women are more conservative with their sexual choices than men, because men can afford to make mistakes in that direction. Women cannot. Women are evolutionarily programmed to be more conservative when it comes to sex. That is the hypothesis being tested in this study by Buss and Schmidt. And they find exactly the points where the woman begins to get more comfortable. She's like, I know this person now, he's desirable, it's not going to be that costly. This person is probably not going to abandon me. I've known him enough. And wahan pe wo trust building shuru ho jati hai. If you're wondering what the sample size is, just Google Buss and Schmidt and you read the entire paper. Here is another interesting study. And this one's also super interesting, right? I'm forgetting who carried the study on, but the idea is somewhat like this. आपके चेहरे पे कितने दाग धब्बे दाने हैं, they're an indication of your medical record. When you have parasites and pathogens in your system, in your blood, in your gut, उसका एक impact आपके चेहरे पे दिखता है. स्क्रीन फ्रीज हो रखी है. स्क्रीन फ्रीज हो रखी है. दिख रहा है सब कुछ? Can you hear me? Weber? Yeah, right. Anyway, let's keep going. So the idea is, the guys that are trying to test it out are like, हमें ये पता है कि जब आदमी बहुत ही पैथोजन या पैरासाइट हैवी होता है अपने सिस्टम में, उसके चेहरे पे वो दिखने लगता है. और हाँ, हमें ये पता है भाई, जब आप मेटिंग के लिए जा रहे हो, जब आप रिप्रोडक्शन के लिए जा रहे हो, यू वांट अ हेल्दी मेट. सो अगर किसी का चेहरा खराब नहीं है, तो उनको, they should be more attractive to other people. More people would want to have sex with them. More people would want to reproduce with them. So they try to see if symmetry is an indicator of parasite pathogen resistance, which is कि क्या आपके चेहरे की symmetry is an indicator कि आपकी body otherwise healthy है और आप sexually attractive हो therefore. And they found that exactly. What is considered more attractive is basically a symmetrical face. जहां पे आप बीच में line center में draw करो, तो left और right symmetrical है. You know that one TikTok trend जहां पे वो चेहरा flip करके दिखाते हैं, symmetry दिखा रहे हैं. If you watch it, you'll feel it within yourself. A symmetrical face is more attractive. They've tested it out several times. They just showed people, देखो ये चेहरे हैं, उसमें से कुछ चेहरे symmetrical थे, कुछ symmetrical नहीं थे. अब वो symmetrical ना होने की वजह से क्या हो सकता है? जैसे मान लो मेरा मुंह थोड़ा ऐसा टेढ़ा है, या मेरे चेहरे पे यहाँ पे एक स्कार है, या मेरे चेहरे पे यहाँ अलग दाने हैं और यहाँ अलग दाने हैं. Whatever takes the symmetry out of my face makes me less attractive. Whatever adds to the symmetry makes me more attractive. And no person's face is absolutely symmetrical. But that asymmetry is an indicator of how pathogen parasite resistant your system is. How can it survive its environment's pathogen and parasite properly? Right? And it's like the slide says, the smaller the deviation from perfect symmetry, the more attractive the face is judged to be. And they tried creating like computer morphed faces, jo faces asli logo ke bhi nahi hai, but they're so symmetrical. And they tried to run that. And it worked. And it's true for both men and women. Likewise, this is another interesting study. And this study, actually, let me just explain the study without the slide, because तुम लोग slide पढ़ने लग जाओगे, फिर वो confuse मारोगे. The study is super interesting. Here's what they did, okay? They wanted to test. They were like, यार देखो, अगर दो healthy individuals have to mate, इनमें कोई तो एक system होगा जो determine करता है कि इनके genes फायदे में है भी साथ में मेट करके कि नहीं. If you know, part of the problem with conquests, conquest समझते हो ना, एक invasion कर दिया यहां से वहां. Part of the problem with conquests in history has been कि एक foreign army आई, area में घुसी, and it started raping the women. And what happened? What all the babies were born, but they were not immunologically fine, क्योंकि genes इस radical amount पे mix कर रहे हैं. Yeah, chalo, even if there is no rape, because we're talking about historical times, even if there is consensual relationships, all the babies are being born with mixed genes, and a lot of them are dying. So these guys, these scientists were asking, there has to be some way in which we pick the right person for ourselves immunologically, ताकि यार जो बच्चा पैदा हो वो survive तो कर सके immunity wise. And they wanted to test this out. Their hypothesis was it has something to do with smell. And so this is what they made the experiment to look like. They were like, listen, कुछ बंदों को बोला सुनो, 2 हफ्ते 2 दिन 3 दिन 4 दिन ये टी-शर्ट पहन के रखनी है तुम्हें, और कोई डिओड्रेंट मत लगाना, कोई सेंट मत लगाना, इसमें अपने पसीने की बदबू जाने दो, योर नेचुरल फेरोमोनिक स्मेल इसमें घुसने दो. And then they took those t-shirts, they put them in plastic bags, and they gave it to a bunch of women. And they asked the women to smell that and rate what t-shirt do they find the most attractive. Who are they most likely to mate with? चेहरा नहीं दिख रहा बंदों का, सिर्फ टी-शर्ट सूंघ रही हैं औरतें. And the women started, smelling those t-shirts and rating their sexual desirability for those smells. And they found towards the end that जो वो rating थी that women created was super, super, super similar to immunological compatibility. इसे कहते हैं major histographic complex, which is essentially a jargon word for immunological compatibility. And it's facilitated through smell. And it happens all around us. It happens all around us. We are attracted to people subconsciously because they smell a certain way to us. And that smell informs our body subconsciously that, dost, you are interested in this person and your babies are going to be healthy, essentially. They found that out, right? And in that same way, hold up. There is another study, and this is about waist to hip ratio. I showed this on my YouTube live stream kuch din pehle. The idea is super simple. Supposedly, they asked men, they gave men 4 drawings in each weight class: underweight, normal weight, overweight, and they did the same with women. They gave women these 4 different drawings for men that look something like this in each category: underweight, normal weight, overweight. And they asked ki what woman do you prefer? And their hypothesis was that there is a certain figure men will prefer and women will prefer because it signals sexual fertility. It signals something about evolutionary advantage. And they found that the hourglass figure, which is between 0.7 and 0.8, waist to hip ratio, is your waist, which is that part of, let me just point it out on the screen, this part, and the hip, which is this part, right? They found that the hourglass figure sort of signals some kind of sexual fitness. And I mean, part of the reason since then it has been taken into ki birthing canal big enough hoga for the baby to appear, because one of the problems with human babies is that their heads are too big, and that is why females have had to expand their birthing canals, which is like their hip sizes have expanded over a time, because bade sir ko, when a baby is born, his head is this big, the body is so small. And there is a natural disadvantage with that, and so on and so forth. But that is the evolutionary explanation, that it signals some kind of sexual fertility. And that fertility has to do with the fact that you can have babies properly. And so regardless of weight, regardless of how heavy you weigh, your waist to hip ratio is 0.7 to 0.8 ke beech mein men prefer for women. And with women, it is that women prefer waist to hip ratio around 1, because women don't care about men having hourglass figure. They want a strong upper body from men. They want a man, no matter what weight class, who can take care of them. Your programming is from the wild. तुम जंगल में प्रोग्राम हुए हो, तुम रह शहरों में रहे हो with rules and laws, but तुम्हारी प्रोग्रामिंग जंगली है. और उस टाइम, while the woman is taking care of the child, because the child is so small, man has to go out and fight and make sure, खाना भी है घर में, और कोई आके चुरा भी नहीं रहा खाना, और कोई आके, हमला भी नहीं कर रहा. And this is a study done by Singh करके एक evolutionary psychologist था. The study name and date are quoted almost with most of the studies. So if you want to look at them deeper, you can find them. And then there is this insane study on selectivity by Kendrick. So follow. Kendrick ने बोला, सुनो औरतों और मर्दों, तुम्हें अपने minimum acceptable criteria देने हैं on status, on agreeableness, on emotional stability, and on attractiveness. तो सपोज मैं उस स्टडी में हूं, तो मेरे से बोला जाएगा तुम्हें मिनिमम कितनी स्टेटस वाली औरत चाहिए एक रेटिंग सिस्टम पे, कितनी अग्रीएबल औरत चाहिए, कितनी इमोशनली स्टेबल औरत चाहिए, कितनी अट्रैक्टिव औरत चाहिए. सेम चीज औरतों के साथ. किसी औरत से पूछा जाएगा तुम्हें मिनिमम कितने स्टेटस वाला बंदा चाहिए, कितना अग्रीएबल बंदा चाहिए, कितना इमोशनली स्टेबल बंदा चाहिए, कितना अट्रैक्टिव बंदा चाहिए. और इट इज नॉट जस्ट टू बी रेटेड फॉर, क्योंकि सामने वाला क्या पूछेगा कितने टाइम के लिए चाहिए, सिंगल डेट, स्टेडी डेटिंग, वन नाइट स्टैंड और मैरिज, राइट? एंड दे केम टू दिस. Let me now just share screen so you can see this properly. Right? Here's what Kendrick Groth and Trost Sadala 1993 basically. This is what they find. They find कि एक सेकेंड, अरे ये जा क्यों नहीं रहा ऊपर? होल्ड अप, ताकि मैं भी देख पाऊं ना हो क्या रहा है. हाँ, एनीवे, आई थिंक सबसे पहले वाला स्टेटस है. ध्यान से देखना वो स्टेटस वाले ग्राफ को. राइट, द डॉटेड लाइन इज मेल डिमांड, कि मेल्स मिनिमम इतना एक्सपेक्ट करते हैं, और द फिक्स लाइन इज फीमेल डिमांड. द फर्स्ट थिंग यू नीड टू नोटिस फ्रॉम ऑल दीज 4 ग्राफ्स इज जनरली जो स्ट्रेट लाइन है इज ऑलवेज हायर देन जो नॉन स्ट्रेट लाइन है. जनरली द स्ट्रेट लाइन इज फीमेल डिमांड्स, फीमेल चूजीनेस इज जनरली मोर देन मेल चूजीनेस. वेट, व्हाट इज दिस? ये क्या मैसेज आ रहा है मेरे को? किसी ने मेरे को कोई मैसेज भेजा क्या? That's so weird. Anyway, oh, what the hell? Stop sharing. Sorry. So the one thing that is clear, and we've discussed this in choosiness twice, is that for females, the criteria for getting involved in a reproductive arrangement is just always higher. Right? But notice, for status, as far as status is concerned, on a single date, females like मेरे को at least 35 percentile समझते हो ना, 35th percentile status वाला बंदा चाहिए. And the man's not too far, वो भी 30th percentile status वाली औरत मांग रहा है. But as soon as you get to steady dating, the difference sort of increases. The woman wants more status, the man's less concerned about status. But get to one night stands and the man just stops caring about her status. He doesn't care what status she has. But a woman, उसके लिए भी status की requirement drop होती है, but इतनी नहीं. And if you see towards marriage, they start converging again. You will see with marriage, almost all these requirements come closer. Marriage के time पे ये सारे biological instinct आदमी कहता है साइड में रख, serious बात करते हैं, practical matter है. Right? Now look at agreeableness. Status मतलब आपकी समाज में कितनी इज्जत है, आप समाज में कितने, like कितनी आपको respect मिलती है. एक बहुत rough sense में समझा जाए तो agreeableness के साथ देखो. Single date पे both men and women are like, listen, we want the other person to be at least 50th percentile agreeable, more agreeable than 50% of the people. कि भाई अपनी अपनी ना चल रहा है बस. They're very close. And steady dating में they're also very close. They're like, यार सुन, हमें agreeable चाहिए इतना, 50th percentile, आधे लोगों से ज्यादा agreeable हो, second half of agreeable में ना हो, बहुत disagreeable ना हो. But notice what happens with one night stands. And the reason why it happens with one night stands in this way is because one night stands, men have nothing to lose. The woman has everything to risk. So for the woman, her requirement still high. कि मैं एक बहुत ही बदतमीज और अपनी अपनी करने वाले आदमी के साथ वन नाइट स्टैंड के साथ ओके नहीं हूं. Man's like, you know what? I don't even care if she's, not agreeable. Because sex is cheap to a man. उसको कोई cost नहीं है after that. But when you see, as soon as it comes to marriage and you have to live together, much like with steady dating where you have to see each other daily, you are like, नहीं भाई यार, मेरे को agreeable इंसान चाहिए. और marriage में सब time, always marriage की requirements are greater than every other requirement in the graph. Because marriage के time पे भाई proper investment है एक इंसान में कई साल रहना है. What is this? Please move this away from the window that is appearing on my screen. Anyhow, with emotional stability, same stuff. With a single emotional stability, सब ज्यादा मांगते हैं. भाई सामने वाला इंसान emotionally stable होना चाहिए, चाहे single date पे क्यों ना जा रहा हूं. But with males, it is less important for males than for females. Steady dating में it comes closer. One night stand में it shows the same thing it has shown up until. For men, all requirements drop. It is the cheapest way to reproduce for men. Cheapest way. So they're like, हमें तो ज्यादा कुछ चाहिए ही नहीं उस time. Except attraction, as a matter of fact, you'll see. But as soon as it comes to marriage, both are like, सुनो यार, हमें बहुत ही emotionally stable इंसान चाहिए. Attractiveness is the only place where males have a higher demand than females. Males are like, बाकी सब छोड़ो, attractive होनी चाहिए. right? And you see, on a single date, it's only slightly more. On a steady dating, it's coming closer. But as soon as it's about one night stands, men are even willing to compromise with that. But women are not. This is the one place women are still going up. अगर तुम सारे ग्राफ्स देखो, women's like, अगर मैं वन नाइट स्टैंड कर रही हूं तो बंदा बहुत ही खूबसूरत होना चाहिए, वरना मैं क्यों करूं? क्योंकि औरत के हिसाब से देखो ना, वो कह रही है मैं वन नाइट स्टैंड कर भी रही हूं, आई एम टेकिंग द कॉस्ट ऑफ दिस सेक्स, सो एटलीस्ट उसके जीन्स तो बढ़िया होने चाहिए, और कुछ नहीं तो उसके जीन्स तो अच्छे होने चाहिए. Because sex in your head is about reproduction, not about pleasure. Right? And eventually, when it comes to marriage again, bande are like, no, we want an attractive female. Female's like, you know what? He doesn't really have to be that attractive. It's okay. Not as much as men want attraction. Right? But this begs the question. How much of this is biology? How much of this is programmed into us by our biology, and how much of this is programmed into us by culture? And that's a tough line to walk, honestly. It's very unclear. This is a debate philosophically that's gone on forever. You could say very well that even jo humne se pehle wali study dekhi, you could just very well say stuff like, well, ye to hamare systems hain, patriarchy hai, this, that, and maybe some part of it is that, even though ye study, I think, काफी cross-culturally reproduced hai, especially around status and attractiveness, काफी cross-culturally reproduced hai. But some of it could be conditioning, but some of it is for sure biology. Tabhi it is noted across culture, across times and such. And even like the important questions to ask yourself, relationship kya hai nature or culture ka? You know, some people say cultures to control people, religion was made to control people, this, that, XYZ type के arguments. Because अगर तुम culture देखो, कुछ 100 सालों पहले तक तो वो था ही religion ना culture. और तो कुछ था ही नहीं culture में, सिर्फ सब कुछ जो था वो religion का part है आज. तो what is culture and what is nature? In fact, Hinduism, I think the debate is between Purush and Prakriti. Prakriti being biology and Purush being, you know, the higher nature of man, which is culture. And so you might say even the waist to hip ratio is, you know, cultural. Hame skinny ladkiyan, of course, advertising programs us to like, but actually advertising programs us to like skinny girls, and that had nothing to do with skinny girls. But you then have to agree कि हम लोग सब इस major level पे programmed हैं non-stop. फिर हम किस चीज के लिए प्रोग्राम्ड, और भी किस चीज, हम वायलेंस के लिए भी प्रोग्राम्ड है. हम सबको एक दूसरे का दोस्त बन के रहना चाहिए. बट एवरी टाइम वी ट्राई टू बी फ्रेंड्स विद ईच अदर, विद you know, communism and League of Nations and United Nations and NATO, all we've seen is that it does not work. So there is some impulse reserved for biology only. Like the desire to have sex. We saw with men this aggressive desire to have sex. Everywhere and anywhere, because there is no cost. I don't have to bear responsibility for the kid that happens. मेरे को थोड़ी 9 महीने रुकना है. मेरे को तो biologically all I care about is more kids. For women, on the other hand, there is a cost. They are more choosy. Also, what we noted as a phenomena in nature is if you do not have culture, some men get all of the women. They reproduce with most women. This is our DNA talking. Politically incorrect, but that's our DNA talking. So if you leave nature to itself, just like you see in chimps, one alpha chimp, all the women, and all the other chimps just hang around. They get no access to women. So what those beta chimps do is they band together in a group, invade the alpha chimp, kill him, tear him to pieces, and take all the women. And वहां पे कोई love का कोई concept नहीं होता, कोई attachment का. Chimps are a highly aggressive species, and they get to reproduce like that through violence. Well, it makes you wonder, why was marriage introduced? Was it somewhat like, were we seeing chimp-like behavior in us? Was it like Harari says कि यार हम settle down कर रहे हैं और अब हम नहीं चाहते हमारी रोज लड़ाइयां हो एक दूसरे से, for whatever XYZ reason, be that food, be that sexual access, whatever. That is why we decided, probably, you know. So the question is, was culture introduced to tame nature? Is that the purpose of culture, to tame nature? Or was culture introduced for some other purpose? And it's not clear. This nature-nurture debate's extremely difficult to put a finger on. I have some idea, but you have to understand this idea that I'll talk about. You, one, may not understand for बहुत reason हो सकते हैं. Two, it's not science. At this point, we are exploring philosophy. And my idea is that nature provides the impulse, culture provides the direction. So the impulse is to reproduce. Culture says शादी करो, बच्चे करो. Nature's impulse is to compete. Culture says जाओ Olympics में भागो और compete करो. Wrestling की fight कर लो, MMA कर लो. Nature has an impulse for attraction. Cultures like attraction को इस तरीके से देखो, advertising जैसे दिखा रहा है. You know, with advertising, most advertisements use women, right? And there is a specific kind of a woman who's known as a man's woman, who's supposed to attract men. And there is a certain kind of woman known as a woman's woman, who's supposed to be found attractive to other women, asexually or even sexually sometimes. And those women are like, the advertising industry is where you should look at if you want to study evolutionary psychology, because that's what they do. All they use is evolutionary psychology. They use sex and survival to sell you stuff. They use status to sell you stuff. And what status stands for is my sexual ability. Agar mera status high as a dude, if I wear that bloody Rolex watch and then I'm standing next to a Mercedes, that Rolex watch and that Mercedes lifestyle with that suit gets coded. And so I'm like, if I'm wearing that Rolex watch, I'm feeling, am I as attractive as James bloody Bond? That's what advertising and culture is all about. So there's many ways in which culture codes what comes from nature into its modern form. What about marriage? What about marriage? Who's to know? Well, one thing's for sure. Marriage definitely reduces the amount of violence that can happen because of access to sexual resource. We see that kind of violence in chimps. That is for certain. But we know very little else. We know very little else. Let's see how much more we are left with. I think we are, as far as I'm concerned, as far as the meat of today's class is concerned, we are done. Let's see. There is a little bit about how evolutionary thinkers think, and I think I should take you over that just so you get an idea of how to come up with your own evolutionary psychology, right? Here is what evolutionary psychologists do. And if you go back to the Peterson clip we watched, you'll see it. Go back to a common ancestor. See what the common ancestor is doing. See if you still have the same behavioral pattern or the biological basis of the same behavioral pattern. Ask yourself. It's very simple to notice, with lobsters, for instance, victory makes serotonin, defeat takes serotonin away because they have simple behavior. We have complex behavior. You remember the chess analogy. So go to a common ancestor, see if there is some commonalities in our behavior. That's what I was trying to do with chimps. People do that with bonobo also. Bonobos, direct opposite of chimps. Never fight, always fucking. Bonobos are fucking non-stop. It's embarrassing. They're always loving and fucking. Chimps are always fighting and fucking. There's a difference, So one of the ways in which these guys do it is they go to a common ancestor, they try and note common comparative behavioral patterns, and they try to come up with explanations for it. The other thing they try and do is they look at a context, look at a situation. Right? Somebody asked me this today on Instagram. Prakhar bhai, what is the evolutionary reason why we want to be unique individuals? What he's asking is, अच्छा मेरे को unique individual बनना है या X आदमी को unique individual आदमी बनना है, उसके पीछे survival या sexual logic क्या हो सकता है? What could be the reason, survival point of view से या sexual point of view से, why I'd like to be unique? So I told the guy, I was like, I don't know, and he told me, he's like, maybe there is none. And I'm like, yeah, it's possible. Because ये survival और sexuality के जो rules हैं, ये वो simple rules हैं. उसके ऊपर complex phenomena में क्या क्या बादल बन रहे हैं, उसका क्या कहना? We don't know. It may not be related to survival or sex. It may not be related to survival or sex. But evolutionary psychology asks you to think in those terms. Comparative terms with your ancestors and survival and sex in terms of your situation. And then it tells you, listen, but that's not enough. Because you can make up a story for anything like this. You can make up a story for anything like this. Why do we have hair? Well, hair helps us sexually, this, that. You can make up a story for anything like this. You need to compare it. Well, compare it with what? Compare it in the sense, you have to compare it with genetic data available to you. You have to compare it with cellular data. You have to compare it with paleontological data. In all these ways, what you're trying to do is you're trying to compare, again, वो comparative वाला angle, with a common parent, with an ancient human form. And you're trying to see कि हाँ, ऐसा हमेशा से होता आया है या ये अभी कुछ cultural है जो ऐसा हो रहा है या हमारी interpretation गलत है इस पे. But the problem with this comparative analysis is that most of these people that we're trying to compare our behavior with are dead. And उनकी सिर्फ हड्डियां अवेलेबल हैं, और उन हड्डियों में से इतना ही जेनेटिक मटेरियल मिलेगा, इतना ही सेल्यूलर मटेरियल तो कुछ खास मिलेगा ही नहीं. बिहेवियरली तो हम कुछ बता ही नहीं सकते उनके बारे में. तो evolutionary psychology remains this field that is trying very hard to explain a lot of stuff, but it's finding very hard to accumulate evidence. And because of that reason, evolutionary psychology falls prey to these two very common thinking errors that you should know of, right? One of them is forced explanation. Har cheez, and I had this phase with my friends, everything can be explained through sex and survival. कुछ भी दे दो, you throw anything at me, eventually I'll make it about sex and survival. It'll take me 7 steps in logic. Oh, इससे ये होता है, इससे ये होता है, इससे ये होता है, इससे होता है, इससे ज़्यादा sexual options बढ़ते हैं ना bro, इससे ज़्यादा survival chances बढ़ते हैं ना bro. And at that point you've got to ask yourself, भाई अगर तेरे को 7 step लगे point A से point B पहुंचने में, तो मैं जो ये behavior कर रहा हूं बिना सोचे, is it really about sex and survival? Or is it part of that complex system that happens? In chess, for instance, bishop moves sideways is one thing. Knight moves 2.5 is one thing. Pawn moves 1 or 2 is one thing. But a tactic, a pattern, a move pattern that leads to a forced checkmate is an entirely different thing. Right? Does it mean it's still about the simple rules? Maybe, but maybe not. Sometimes you're just forcing an explanation. And you'll see a lot of this with alpha male chads and pickup artists and a lot of like just pop evolutionary psychology givers. Sometimes even proper evolutionary psychology givers, I'm like, don't you think that explanation is a little forced? This field is so new, and it used to be called sociobiology pehle. Ab isko evolutionary psychology kehte hain. But this field is kind of so new and still developing in so many ways that we don't have a very solid ground. And the other thing is circular logic. And circular logic works something like this. Circular logic or naturalistic fallacy or equating what is with what must be. Because अगर तुम evolutionary argument सुनो पूरा, तो बात यह है जो भी आज कुछ हमारे पास है उसका evolutionary advantage है, तभी तो वो है. तो इसका मतलब यह है अगर कोई चीज है वो automatically अच्छी है. And it happens something like this. Let me try and see if I can illustrate this. You'll be like, trait X क्यों है? You'll come up with a story, trait X क्यों है? That story is going to be built around the fact कि trait X है. Suppose मैं बोलता हूं बाल क्यों है? मैं उसकी जो story बनाऊंगा, उस story को बनाते हुए ध्यान ये रखूंगा कि this has to end with बाल. So I create a story and that story leads me back to the same place कि बाल है. Because the story is designed for the conclusion to be reached. This is a very common thinking error. You know, and I mean, I don't want to give thousands of examples of this, but the idea is just because it is, it must be good. It should be because it is. इसको naturalistic fallacy कहते हैं philosophy में. Naturalistic fallacy. Simple. इसको naturalistic fallacy कहते हैं. Right? And I have just 2 small examples to give about ये जो circular logic or forced explanation है that sort of this very smart guy came up with. His name was Stephen Jay Gould. Stephen Jay Gould was a paleontologist. वो उसका evolution से सिर्फ एक दूर का वास्ता था, but he came up with 2 very interesting points that destroyed ये जो evolutionary obsessive thinking है कि हर चीज survival और sex के बारे में है. The first of them he called a spandrel. And a spandrel is essentially this part of an arch. ये देख रहे हो, हमें architecturally पता है arch is a very strong structure. आर्च रखो, बहुत स्ट्रॉन्ग स्ट्रक्चर है. आर्च रखो, बहुत स्ट्रॉन्ग स्ट्रक्चर है, बट आर्च बनाते हुए ये स्पेस अपने आप बन जाती है. यू हैव टू सॉर्ट ऑफ डील विद दिस. यू हैव टू सॉर्ट ऑफ मेक दिस. दिस इज द बाय प्रोडक्ट ऑफ क्रिएटिंग एन आर्च. इट सर्व्स नो अदर पर्पस, बट इसकी जरूरत है. अगर हमें आर्च बनानी है तो हमें स्पैंड्रल डालना पड़ेगा. द सेम वे अ चिन कम्स अबाउट. हमारे चिन का कोई पर्पस नहीं है. द चिन इज जस्ट कनेक्टिंग अ 2 jaws. So there is a lot of evolutions that happen as a consequence of other evolutions. And what this symbolic point, this point in general makes the case is हर evolution बढ़िया नहीं है और हर evolution purposeful नहीं है. कुछ चीजें बस हो गई हैं. Recognize करो. तो कई तुम्हारे दिमाग में ख्याल, तुम्हारी psychology इस तरीके से coded है जो naturally अच्छी नहीं है. इसको सोचना पड़ेगा. वो बस हो गया है as a matter of consequence. And you know, one of the arguments is possibly consciousness is a spandrel. And that that's just an amazing argument because there is depth to be explored there. कि consciousness का कोई evolutionary purpose नहीं है, वो तो कुछ और solve कर रहे थे, अचानक ही हो पड़ा. And the other is exaptation, और exaptation हम discover कर चुके हैं. Stephen J. Gould and Verba करके इसकी वो थी. उसका वो यही है कि पहले जो wings थे, they were supposed to keep you warm. Eventually, wing-bearing animals got so light they could fly with it. So not all adaptations, not all evolutions happened because of the same purpose. They happened probably because of a different purpose, but got co-adopted later. Which means everything you think about right now, psychological terms, is not necessarily good. Your base programming is not necessarily good. It sometimes need reinterpretation. And that is what Stephen J. Gould made as a point. He was like, भाई, तुम अपनी evolutionary purity को अपने घर रखो. ढंग से समझना, सोचना सीखो. And that is as far as evolutionary psychology is concerned.